Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show, and I'm glad that you guys can join me on this episode. Let me get this attached straight. Like it to be in the center, all that good stuff. Everything's good. I'm glad that you guys can join me wherever you are. If you're under the sound of this voice, you have my deepest appreciation for being under the sound of this voice. And I'm happy that you can join me for another episode. It is Wednesday, November 19th. 2025. We are moving on our way to Thanksgiving. I'm probably not going to do a show on Thanksgiving, just to give you a heads up. And I am strongly considering taking a break for Christmas, as I would imagine most of my guests are going to take breaks. And I've been going on a tear for a year now at this point. In fact, this may be like my year anniversary. I need to check the exact date on when the new iteration of the show started. But either way, really good news, or interesting news, I should say. And I'm going to hit that news with my guest. And since he is here, I'm going to go to him. He is in the background. My man, Dr. Wilmer Leon. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Man, I'm talking to Jamal Thomas. Come on, I'm doing great.
Dr. Wilmer Leon.
Can't say that.
He's a radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, host of Connecting the Dots on YouTube and on Insider Issues on Sirius Radio. Thank you for joining me for this. We have had interesting news take place in the United States. The government is back on, for whatever that's worth. But we've also had a discharge petition that was effectively forced through to force the Epstein files to come through. Now, this was against the opposition of Donald Trump, who fought against this for like 4 months. Mike Johnson, his, I don't know what you want to call it, puppet of sorts,
Muppet.
Speaker of the House, sycophant, all of those things. Mike Johnson fought against it tooth and nail, and it was forced through by effectively Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, who got the discharge position, shamed the rest of the Republicans. And when Donald Trump saw his numbers where he was 39 points underwater on this issue, eventually was like, okay, we'll do it. But the caveat is we're going to have a ton of investigations, and we're going to try to use those investigations to stymie the release of the actual information. And Donald Trump's problem is the emails that were released, his name is all through those emails, strongly indicating that he knew about the girls, he knew about the abuse, and he was in association with those victims, and had connections with Epstein, even going into his first term as president. Give me a take on this before showing anything associated with this. What are your thoughts, just in general?
Well, the hypocrisy that this clearly demonstrates is just, once again, nauseating. You would hope that the folks that are elected to represent our interests, no matter what end of the spectrum, political spectrum you're on, you would really hope that they would be honest in their efforts. And this is no new revelation. It just reinforces what we've come to understand, but that doesn't make it any less nauseous or nauseating. Right. So Mike Johnson decides that he's going to shut down the House of Representatives, sends them home for what, 5 weeks?
Yeah.
He decides that he's not going to swear in the representative-elect from Arizona, basically just kicking the can down the road because he was eventually going to have to swear the woman in. What is her name? Her last name is Gil.
I know you're referring to, yeah. Basically, yeah. He prevented her from this one.
Why? You created this whole mythology And then once the pressure got insurmountable, now you try to flip the script. And if I don't know if you listened to Mike Johnson's comments after the vote, now all of a sudden, this had to be done, and the truth must be told. Come on, man. Really? It's pathetic. And the president still sticking to this is a Democratic Party hoax. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
And I wish I had something else I could say. I wish I had something more intelligent. I mean, I think you usually bring me on here because I have some level of intellect. Some may question that, and I understand it, but all I got is damn.
I mean, they're throwing their bodies to protect a pedophile. That's mind-blowing, right? I mean, Massey got out there and said this. This is what Massey said on the House floor. And look, I have to give credit to Massey, Rokana, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's shocked the hell out of me recently.
Right.
But this is Massey on the floor, and he's right.
That is wrong. Do not let the Senate muck this bill up. And if you're a party to that in the Senate, you are part of this cover-up that we are trying to expose. I am sorry if one of your billionaire donors is going to get embarrassed because he went to Rape Island. That is what they have coming. In fact, they need to be on the other side of bars, a lot of them. Some of them will be embarrassed, but some of them need to go to prison, and the survivors know that. So how will we know if this bill has been successful? We will know when there are men, rich men in handcuffs being perp walked to the jail. And until then, this is still a cover-up.
Yeah. Rape Allen is what he's deemed it. Rape Allen. I used to call it pedophile Allen.
Her name is
Rape Allen. Okay.
Grijalva. Representative Grijalva is the name of the woman that just got sworn in from Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but here to me is even I think the bigger crime is we've been taken through this entire mess, and yesterday a whole lot of people were applauding the vote.
Mm-hmm.
And rightfully so. But what does it get us? Nothing. Because Donald Trump has directed, I guess that's Pam Bondi,
the
DOJ, to initiate these other investigations. So I assume that the administration is going to hide behind, there are these ongoing investigations. Therefore, ergo, we can't release the information, even though now everybody voted, with the exception of this fool from Louisiana, everybody voted to release the information. The president signed the legislation. But there are these ongoing which is why he flipped his script when somebody whispered in his ear, Mr. President, I think we figured out a way around this. And he went, oh, okay. Sounds like a good idea. It's subterfuge all over again. So where does this take us other than nowhere?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Massey is even went so far as to say he's talking about criminal charges because at this point they're breaking the law if they try to avoid releasing the information. Also, it's humiliating.
Not Pam Bondi can hide behind there are ongoing investigations until all of the cows come home. I
But does
believe.
that work? Yeah, no, you're right. But does that work though? I mean, Donald Trump is 37 points underwater on this issue. Even Republicans have looked at this and said, "How are you protecting a pedophile?" That is damaging. And then the emails that came
I'm
out.
not protecting a pedophile. There are ongoing investigations, and we're trying to get to the bottom of this. And
Right,
we
but
can't come.
right,
I
right.
mean,
But Trump could have released that information overnight if he wanted to. And for
what?
the last 4 months, he's been fighting tooth and nail. Like, so, like it's the wife beating thing, right? If I say, so how long have you been beating your wife, Dr. Leon? And you're like, what are you talking about? I don't beat my wife. But we're having a conversation, but you're beating your wife either way.
Right.
And the people are bringing up, like, dude, how are you throwing your body and fighting for months on end to protect a pedophile and pedophiles? And is it possible that you're really protecting yourself because you're on that list?
But see, I think part of it depends on what has become the administration's objective, and how do they define win?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I've always tried to get my son and my students to understand is, when you start out on a mission, things don't always go as planned.
Right.
And so you have to make adjustments. And sometimes you've got to redefine what I call redefine win. You have to redefine what your victory is going to be, because you've come to see can't get there from here.
Yeah.
So I gotta go another route. I gotta do another thing, and victory has shifted from this to that. So I can only assume now the numbers are what the numbers are, and the numbers are horrible.
Yes.
I mean, he's lost 18 points. He's lost 18 points. Over like the last 3 or 4 weeks. 39% approval rating, 57% disapprove, 4% not sure. There's been an 18-point swing in a month or 2 months, something like that. So I don't know what they're trying to salvage now. But my point is, I don't know that I have an answer to your last question, because I don't know what they're trying to save.
Yeah.
What does Gil Scott Heron say? Nobody's fighting because nobody knows what to save. Save your soul from winter in America. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it ain't looking good.
I mean, sometimes it's just not losing, right?
Right.
Like you're playing a chess game. You initially start off with a win, and then you're like, all right, how do I just not lose? How do I draw this out?
And you and I were talking about using the chess analogy the last time I was on, and I said, when you when you come to the board, each player has their first 4 or 5 moves in their head until your opponent forces you to change what you were planning to do.
Yeah.
So, how does the president go on Friday from the position he was holding on Friday, and most people thinking, oh, this isn't going to go through, to what we got on Tuesday, and Mike Johnson standing there now disregarding everything he has said,
Yes,
every lie he has told over the last month. Mike Johnson, Mr. Muppet, why did you shut down the damn government? I mean, not shut down the government. Why did you send Congress home for 5 weeks?
Yep.
Only to get us here, where we knew we would wind up eventually. But see, this also to me poses another question. Why did the 7 Democrats in the Senate fold on the ACA bill, on the ACA issue, shutting down the government?
Oh, did we? We didn't get a chance to talk about that. Okay. So maybe you weren't on it. Okay.
Well, I think we talked about it while it was ongoing. I don't think I've been on since. But the dots I'm connecting, shameless plug for my podcast. The dots I'm connecting here are: you won 2 weeks ago, Tuesday. You wiped the floor with the Republicans across the country.
Right.
All you did was kick ass and take names. You look at the polling numbers the approval numbers of the president that I just cited. You're winning on every front. You won on this front. Why did you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory? If you had held your position, and that's, I think, the operative thing here. If you had held your position, where would we be now? Where would the Democrats be now in terms of leveling the playing field, putting the president on the back foot on defense? Where would you be now?
Yeah.
Tim Kaine,
Fetterman.
well, you'd be in a much stronger position. You'd be in a much stronger position now than you have been in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So why did you fold?
I want to get to that question.
Okay.
Because that's a damn good question that I honestly, God, don't have an answer to. And I've spoken to a few people.
I got an answer for you.
Well, before, hold that answer just for 1 second.
All right.
The other thing with Epstein list is Israel. Because over and over again, it's very clear at this point that Epstein was some kind of asset. He was in conversations. He was working with
He was
spies.
a Mossad agent.
Yeah, or agent or asset, one or the other. But he was obviously in connection with Israel. And they seem to be doing everything in their power to avoid connecting those dots. Shameless plug also.
Appreciate it.
But meaning they're avoiding that link between those two things. And so it's like, if indeed he was an agent or an asset, he was an agent and an asset in lieu of something else. Meaning it wasn't just he was an asset just to be an asset. It's like you're an asset for some purpose. And the belief is that the purpose was to get some kind of intel, or at the very least to be able to elicit support through force of embarrassment, humiliation from various members of Congress or elites in our society. I mean, his house is supposed to have been wired and all of this stuff. You're talking about all of these people who are supposedly had sex with, according to Megyn Kelly, 15-year-olds are not children. Weirdly enough, I hate to give her a news flash. They are. Like, she's trying to give Republicans a pass on this nonsense. Like, well, they were only having sex with 15-year-olds. Those are children. Those are children.
Well, to that point, there is a difference between a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, and it's 7 years. The difference is 7 years. And that difference makes no difference because it's called statutory rape.
Yes.
For a reason. Now the person she was allegedly having this conversation with about this issue, who 15-year-old, it's still statutory rape.
Yeah.
So you can try to I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, diminish.
But it's still statutory rape.
Yeah. I guess my thing is, how many of these members of Congress are compromised? That's the other issue.
Well, too many. One is too many. And see, I think the Mossad issue is an even bigger issue than even you and I probably know. Because they operate off of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And how many votes have been cast? How much support for this? What is it? How much do they get a year?
Well, it's like $3.6 billion a year.
3.6 billion. Thank you.
Yeah.
How many votes have been leveraged for that 3.6 billion? They went from, I think, a 5-year deal to a 10-year deal during the Obama administration. Now they want a 20-year deal.
Yep.
And how many votes are being cast in support of that support based upon leverage, based upon being compromised?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question, but so there are a number of subplots to all of this that I think people need to pay very close attention to. And they need to keep asking the questions, because you're not hearing the questions being asked on MSNBC. You're not hearing the questions being asked on CNN. You're not hearing the questions being asked as they're standing out on the steps of the House and the Senate. So we need to keep asking these questions, because this is how they operate. And so, along with the campaign contributions that Gregory Meeks has been getting, and so many of these other members of Congress have been getting from AIPAC and other entities, we need to keep calling this out and asking, and Hakeem Jeffries and Richie Torres, and Kamala Harris got $6 million from her campaign from AIPAC. People need to keep asking these questions.
One of the other interesting things before we flip over to why Democrats cave, Plaskett. I don't know if you saw the documentation. So there have been multiple emails that have been released.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump saw through those emails. And as I pointed out, he obviously knew Epstein was abusing young girls.
Mm-hmm.
Trump seemed to have hung out with many of the victims in many respects. Epstein's brother went on Cuomo and pointed out, look, man, if my brother obviously knew damaging information that would have ended the political careers of Donald Trump and other political actors. Basically, they would have had to cancel the election, I think is his exact quote. Plaskett gets caught up in this also because there were emails where she was going back and forth with Epstein.
Oh, the woman from the Virgin Islands.
Yeah, that's not an elected member of Congress, but apparently sits there nonetheless.
No, she's an elected member of Congress, but she has no vote because she comes from the Virgin Islands.
Thank you. And so she's getting information from Epstein, and she's on congressional committee talking. I believe she was talking to Cohen.
Right.
And Epstein was feeding her information, feeding her questions to effectively answer. Now, there are all sorts of problems with this, right? Like, A, how does he have your phone number? He's texting you directly. That's weird in and of itself, right? Like, I don't have Plaskett's phone number. I don't know how many people have Plaskett's phone number, but apparently Epstein did. This is her defense of this. She's standing up here trying to give a defense for why a pedophile has her direct phone line and why he is feeding her information in the middle of congressional testimony. Let me know if this argument works for you.
And I got a text from Jeffrey Epstein, who at the time was my constituent, who was not public knowledge at that time that he was under federal investigation, and who was sharing information with me.
But it was public knowledge that he was a pedophile. It was public knowledge that he was a pedophile. Whether he was under federal investigation, and that is secondary to the point. You are getting information from a guy who's known as a pedophile, and he is feeding that information to you. How many of her constituents have her direct text message?
Well,
That argument
that
falls flat for me. That's my point.
that one, Fred Hampton has a speech where he says, you come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain, and conclusions that don't conclude. This is an answer that ain't answering. This is a conclusion that don't. He was, at the time, he was a constituent of mine. So during a congressional hearing, she is getting text messages from a pedophile directing her regarding questions that she should be asking.
Yes.
The focus of the investigation or the testimony. That he was a constituent of mine. My phone rang. I had to take the call from my constituent. Don't you? I'm an elected representative. This is what we and take a look at, if you can run that one back. Take a look at the sister sitting behind her like this. What? What'd you say? I think she's got pink. She might have pink on. She's sitting like this. No, the one in the blue.
Right here.
Yeah.
On the far right. Yeah.
Look at her.
She's
What?
Like, you got me sitting behind you while you answer some stupid question like this. Yeah.
No, it makes, see, and this shows you how deep this thing goes.
Yeah, it's both parties.
How deep this thing goes. And for a long time we were looking at a parade of men. So now you've got to wonder, as a woman, how does she get drawn into this trap? Yeah. Oh, I know, because he's a constituent of hers, and
there's that. He's a constituent. All my constituents have my direct personal text message.
Right.
All of them.
During hearings.
Yeah.
During hearings. Now, well, anyway.
I mean, like you said, this doesn't answer anything, right?
No, explanations that don't explain.
And one
conclusions that don't conclude.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. And one last thing, just because I know how much you like Trump. Yes. This is a brave reporter, kind of.
Is that Miss Piggy?
Yeah, relatively speaking.
Okay.
Asking Donald Trump a question with him sitting there with Bonesaw.
Oh, that one. Okay, I thought you were talking about the one on the plane.
Oh, there's so many of these, right? Where he's flipping out. He called one woman Piggy.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to. Okay, go ahead.
I think this one is worse, frankly.
Mr. Becker, why wait for Congress to release the Epstein files? Why not just do it now?
No, it's not the question that I mind, it's your attitude. I think you are a terrible reporter. It's the way you ask these questions. You start off with a man who's highly respected, asking him a horrible, insubordinate, and just a terrible question. And you could even ask that same exact question nicely. You're all psyched. Somebody psychs you over at ABC. You're going to psych it. You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I would turn out to be right. But you know who does have? Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who ran Harvard.
And now we just have deflection. You're a terrible person. You're a terrible reporter. And Fry, I thought she asked that fine. I would have asked that question differently. Hey, why are you protecting the pedophile?
Well, my response would have been, even if all that is true, the question still remains.
Yeah.
That the question still remains. Because I was in not with the president, but I was in a situation where I asked a question and the person I was asking the question to started attacking me personally. And my response was, I'll give you all that. But the question still remains.
Yeah.
Why did you do this? Just answer the question. So,
It's like, you attack me all you want.
yeah,
Doesn't
but the
change the
question
question.
still remains.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah, he dodging, deflecting, dancing,
but see,
throwing everybody in the way. Bill Clinton, Larry Summers.
and see, that also shows you, and I don't say this in any way to demean the reporter, but they're always trying to strike a balance between being hard-nosed and retaining access, because their credentials can be pulled at any time. And now, instead of standing in the room, now she's standing on the street screaming at the building instead of standing in the room. So,
by the way, he did threaten her credentials.
Well,
he,
there you go.
he was like, we should take ABC's credentials away.
There you go.
You guys attack me all the time and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I mean, for one, it's like, dude, you're all through the emails. You were getting money from him for your house at Mar-a-Lago as you were in office. Like, meaning this is not like a relationship where, I threw him out, he was a sicko. Not so much. Not so much. Like, it's like you got to explain those emails. But yeah, she's remaining respectful despite the fact that that's a hard-nosed question.
So he was a sicko when you threw him out. Was he a sicko 10 years before when you guys are yucking it up and you got your arms around these women, and as you know, I will say, hand clasped upon buttocks.
All right. All right.
Clasping buttocks. Was he a sicko then? Did you know he was a sicko then? They're talking about you in 1,000 emails.
Yeah,
I've got a friend. We've been friends 64 years, and I'm 66, and you won't find my name in 1,000 emails from him.
Right.
I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, I send emails all the time out for the show. You're not going to find 1,000 of anybody.
No.
Yeah. Why did Democrats capitulate? As you point out, pulling victory from the pulling defeat from the jaws of victory.
Right.
They had just won all of those elections. Trump's approval rating was plummeting. Grocery bills, inflation, all of those things was going through the roof. He was underwater on pretty much every issue he won the election on. They were winning in regards to the shutdown fight, as evidenced by the electoral victories that they brought in. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're winning too much, man. We got to capitulate.
Because they were winning too much. And especially in the context of the New York mayor's race with Mamdani. And the signal that election was sending to the Democratic Party elite about a more populist democratic socialist position. And the elite, the Nancy Pelosi's and the Bill and Hillary Clintons and the what's the guy down in Louisiana, James Carville's.
Oh yeah.
They don't want to go in that direction. So some would posit that that they could win the battle but ideologically lose the war. That as citizens, we would love to see them move further to the left. We would love to have health care. We would love to have child care. We would love to have better public education. We would love to have better retirement plans. Those are the things that they run on. Those are the things that they discuss in order to attract votes, because they know what it is we want to hear. But their benefactors, the folks that enable them to retire as millionaires, damn sure don't want them to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Chuck Schumer playing good cop, bad cop. Because there are those there are a number of reports that'll say Chuck Schumer wasn't surprised that those 7 Democrats and Angus King, I would say Genghis Khan, Angus King, voted as an independent with the Democratic caucus, with the 7 Democrats. That Chuck Schumer was in the game the entire time. Again, playing the good cop role as they played the bad cop role, because they really don't want to go there. Now, is that the answer? I don't know. Is it a sensible thing to consider? I believe it is. That the game was fixed from the get-go. Because I can't think of any other reason why they would be that stupid.
Yeah.
You're winning. You were winning on all fronts. The numbers, you were ahead 10 points in a lot of the polls. When you looked at the polling on this issue, they were winning in some polls, they were winning by 12, 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I, early in the game, when the thing first started, you asked me what direction was this going to go. And I said, well, we're going to have to wait at least a week or two to see, because once people miss their second full paycheck, I think you and I had this conversation. Once people miss their second paycheck, then we've got to look to see where the numbers are. Right. And that'll tell us when I was putting it on Hakeem Jeffries, when Hakeem Jeffries will decide to fold. Well, when folks missed that second paycheck and the numbers came back and the Democrats were still had favorable numbers, we were like, oh, the people are behind them. The people want them to fight. And it's like Vegas. People are putting money down on them. Keep fighting. You're like, I think I'm going to throw in the towel.
It's bizarre. I mean,
because they didn't want to really go there.
I think Ted Rawl made the point of saying, because Ted thought that Ted was like, Republicans are taking a hit. Obviously, they're going to have to capitulate. Because, Donald Trump had put out the thing saying, look, we need to get rid of the filibuster.
Right.
Okay, well, he said that because he realized, hey, this doesn't look good for us.
I said to you that was the first sign to me when he called Thune and said, get rid of the filibuster. I think I said to you, I know I said it on a number of shows, that's the first sign that Trump knows he's in trouble. And it wasn't only because he called Thune and told him to do away with the filibuster. Thune's response was no.
Yeah.
And that was something that Trump was not used to hearing, not since he was 7 years old. He's not used to hearing no. His mother wouldn't even tell him no. And then he called Muppet Mike. And Muppet Mike told him no. He knew he was in trouble. And I can't remember the woman's name, Jean Shaheen, comes out and says, well, it was the best offer on the table. That woman should not have been at the table. She should not have been at the adult table. She should have been at the kiddies table, because she ain't got no expertise in negotiation. She wasn't reading the room. You were winning. He realized he was losing. And even his own team was telling him no. And you can't see that?
Yeah.
And the numbers were in your favor? And you were 10 days away from Thanksgiving. And more important than that, you were 11 days away from Black Friday. And you want Black Friday to come on the calendar and people don't have paychecks? The number one day in the economy where businesses can make or break their year.
Mm-hmm.
You had them. It's that. Where's that picture? I could dig it out. It's the Dr. J. Larry Bird photograph where Larry Bird got a whole lot of collar and Dr. J got a whole lot of windpipe. because Larry Bird. Let me see if I can find it.
This said Larry Bird got a whole lot of collar. Dr. Dre got a whole lot of windpipe.
I can't find it. But because Larry Bird is so much bigger than Dr. J, when you first look at the picture, a lot of people say, wow, look at Larry Bird kicking Dr. J's behind. And then I say, yeah, but look who's got collar and look who's got windpipe.
Yeah.
They had windpipe.
Yeah.
They had windpipe. And they let it go.
I don't have an answer for it. I honest to God, don't have an answer for it. Because you're right. This was one of those situations where you were applying pain and the public was appropriating blame on one of the political parties that just so happy wasn't yours. And
the public was right.
And the public was right. I mean, because look, for worse come to worse, whatever I think about Obamacare, the idea that you are fighting tooth and nail for premiums to go up by 3 times is outrageous. And if you can't make that argument, like I remember in old days, do you remember when I think it was Mitt Romney was running, he had Paul Ryan as VP and Democrats were running ads with Republicans. I think it was a Republican that looked like Paul Ryan taking a grandmother up in a wheelchair off a cliff and then throwing her off the cliff. And Republicans was like, oh, that's outrageous. That's unfair. That was a damn good ad.
Right.
The fact that I remember that ad 15 years later gets across how good that ad was because that ad was apt, right? It's like you are gutting and making people's lives miserable in regards to healthcare. And you're destroying the healthcare sector as weak as that healthcare sector already is. And if you can't make that argument stick, like Obamacare is the only thing that I can think of the Democrats pass in regards to this kind of big bill of sorts.
Right.
As problematic as it is, it's all they got, right? You defend the thing that you got. If you can't defend that, and if you're not willing to go to the mat for that, you're not willing to go to the mat for anything. That looks horrendous.
Which is why we thought Hakeem Jeffries would fold.
But he didn't.
He didn't. But I'm saying that's why early on in the game, we were just waiting for him to fold. But the House anyway, Democrats realized we've got a winning position.
Yes.
You know, you're playing Bid West and you're sitting there looking at your hand and you go, well, I got the big joker. I got the little joker. I got the ace, the 2. Oh, we're going to Boston on this one.
Right.
And,
right.
And Gene Shaheen and what's his name from and Tim Kaine, they didn't play their cards.
Will this have any effects later on? Or is Trump just that bad where they're going to take the Senate or the House either way? Like, meaning the midterms are just going to go miserably for him one way, either way, despite the fact that they weren't willing to actually go to the mat for this.
Well, here's the thing. Here's what I see as being the saving grace is the expiration of the subsidies is real. The 31st of December is coming.
Yes.
They can't do anything about that. They're going to have to vote. To the Democrats' credit on this, they championed the issue. It now is well, Epstein once again has taken over the news cycle, but it's front and center. And so after Thanksgiving, when they get back in December, they can't let, they got to do something by the 31st of December, or else, folks, premiums are going to go through the roof. And contrary to the popular narrative, it's white folks that are going to suffer. It's Republicans that are going to suffer. There was a woman, I can't remember the congressman's name, Republican, from Iowa, or I think he was from Iowa, and he held a town hall meeting, and this woman calls in and she says something to the effect of, I have breast cancer, my husband has Alzheimer's, we make $45,000 a year. The cost of our healthcare is going to go up like 5 times what it is now, and we're left with 2 options: bankruptcy or early death. And they played this on television. It wasn't a commercial, it was an interview. They're interviewing the guy, the congressman, and he plays this recording from this woman, and he says, we got to fix this. So, to the Democrats' favor, the 31st of December is coming, and if they are able to do something on this, then I think the midterms tilt in their favor.
Republicans are not going to do anything to fix Obamacare. They took 40 votes trying to get rid of Obamacare. A dog chasing a car. If it wasn't for John McCain, they would have gotten rid of Obamacare, and that was only because John McCain hated Donald Trump.
Right.
How do they turn around and now try to fix, or try to? I don't even know what fix means in this context.
Because their constituents are being left with 2 choices: bankruptcy or early death. And how they well, see, I think implicit in your question are 2 questions: how do they do it, and how do they spin it? Because I don't see how January 1st comes and folks wind up incurring the costs that they're going to incur. I don't, somebody else may know, but how they get around this, I don't know. Especially with the way that the Democrats have positioned the argument up to this point. In fact, because remember now, Thune said, Muppet Mike said, all we want you to do is pass a clean CR.
Right.
And then we'll deal with affordable care. Just pass a clean CR. So now, if Hakeem Jeffries is smart, if Chuck Schumer is smart, then that's questionable and honest. Now we passed the clean CR. We got to deal with this by the 31st of December. And then they just need to start playing that clip from that woman from Iowa. Or this is what's going to happen to too many American people. And Thune and Muppet Mike, it's on you.
Just be clear, though. A deal made by Thune has nothing to do with Mike Johnson.
Oh, well, except that the deal has to get through the House, has to get through the Senate. It has to be the same deal before it can get to the president's desk.
Right, but Mike doesn't even have to bring it up. The House doesn't even have to bring this deal up.
Doesn't have to, but this could very well be me being optimistic. This could very well be me being, because I am an optimist. I know you're a pessimist. I'm an
I'm
optimist.
not a pessimist. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a Star Trek guy. I'm not a pessimist.
Okay, you're a realist.
I just don't see, like,
Mr.
there's
Spock,
nothing in
you're
me
a
that
realist.
believes that the Republican Party cares about this stuff.
And they may not. They may not. But the bigger political fallout from this will be nuclear. It'll have half-lives. It'll pollute the ground for generations. I don't see how they avoid it. And again, I may be as wrong as the day is long. I just don't see how they avoid doing something. And so here's what they do. Here's what they do. They extend it for 2 years. They put a income ceiling cap on those that can have the subsidies.
Yeah.
They put an income cap, and I don't know what the cap is. $180,000, $380,000 total income, whatever. And they make some adjustments to who gets the money and how they get the money, so that they're able to say, we got rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, and the money is actually going to the ratepayer instead of just going to benefit the insurance company. They figure out a way so that the Republicans can support their waste, fraud, and abuse narrative, and they then can stick a flag in the ground and say, we did this for the American people. We're saving money. They'll create some algorithm to show, oh, we saved $1 zillion, and blah 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 blah. And the Democrats will go along with that, and that's what they'll do. How's that for an answer?
I can see that. I can see that. I
Where is my Dr. J picture?
I can see that. I can see them trying to do something like that, especially if they think the pain is going to be
the big thing I think they're going to do is they're going to say the subsidies only apply to those that make 300. If you make more than $300,000 a year, you don't get something like that. You don't get the subsidy.
Put a price limit on it, or income restriction on it. I mean, look, I watched the Republican Party fire American workers, meaning the richest man on the planet going through firing American workers. I've watched them take $1 trillion out of Medicaid. I've watched them destroy Social Security. You would have thought that all of these things would have been radioactive. Not so much. And so when the next thing come up of, hey, people's insurance rates are going to go up by 3 times, I look at it and say, well, if the other things weren't radioactive, why would this be radioactive? I mean, you have an anesthetized American public. Like, meaning, if those rates go up, are people going to go out marching? Are they going to raid the Capitol like on January 6th, as they should? Like, I don't
know. Well, probably not. Well, I don't know. But I think part of the answer to your question is the Democrats effectively made this issue front and center. And that's the difference between this and some of the other things like Social Security that you mentioned. The Democrats since September have made this issue front and center. And so the question now becomes, over the next month or after Thanksgiving, they should be talking about it now, but but after Thanksgiving, because now I think Thanksgiving is Thursday, so Monday will be, I think, the 1st of December.
Mhm.
If they revert back to that narrative, I think it'll prove to be it'll work in their favor.
We will see. I
That we
mean,
will.
obviously, I don't want people's rates going up, obscene amounts.
No.
And that phone call that you mentioned is just devastating. That is, you get to the ripe years of your life after expending all of your labor and energy into a particular country. And then you're stuck with, okay, my husband is Alzheimer's, I have cancer. What am I going to do with the situation? And my rate's about to go up to a
Yeah,
point where I
sit here
can't
and
afford
die.
it. Yeah. Yeah. It's just outrageous.
So, if they need to go back to the grandmother in the wheelchair getting thrown off the cliff ad, and use the voiceover of the woman that just called into the that's, if they're smart, that's what they'll do, because that's real.
Yeah.
That's the reality for so many suffering Americans. They have no choice. But they've had no choices before and done the wrong thing. So,
Dr. Wilmer Leon, always appreciate you, man. Dr. Wilmer Leon, he's radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, host of Connecting the Dots on YouTube, and on his show on Sirius Radio, Inside the Issues. You have a awesome day, man. Thank you for this. You be safe.
my pleasure,
Okay?
man.
Have a
You
good
do
one.
the same.
Bye-bye. All right. Dr. Wilmer Leon is fantastic. We're going to go from one great guest to another one. We have Kit Klarenberg. How you doing, Kit? You doing okay this morning? Or this afternoon for you?
Well, pretty decent, Jamal. Pretty decent. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. I can't complain. Kit Klarenberg, he's an investigative journalist documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perception. You can find his work on Global Delinquents, The Gray Zone UK, and even on The Gray Zone. Kit, I am happy that you could join me. I often read your articles. I saw one of the articles that you put up that is rather gruesome, but I have been hearing whispers of this for several months now and didn't necessarily know the reality of it. So I'm glad you covered it. It's called Global Zionist Organ Trafficking Conspiracy. This is deeply unfortunate. Not shocking, considering, they're committing a genocide, right? So put it in context. But break this down for me. The argument in the article is effectively that Israel has been harvesting organs, not just during this war, but for years. And that these whispers have effectively been bubbling up, but nobody has been held accountable for it, because for all intents and purposes, you're talking about Israel working with their military in order to take organs from people that they've killed. Break this down for us. Give us a summary of this as we step into it.
Okay, sure. So, just as a bit of historical background, and yes, this is deeply unsettling, disturbing stuff, dear viewers. So, brace yourselves. Is all I can, all I can say. Just as a bit of background to this, one of the biggest markets for organ transplants in the world are Jews and Israelis, because there is a lot of controversy within Jewish circles about whether organ transplants and organ donation are acceptable under Jewish religious law. So you have a situation in which in Israel, like the rate of people who are signed up as organ donors is like, it's amongst the lowest in the world. Like, it's tiny fraction of their population. So, and yet, of course, there are a large number of Israelis and Jews who need kidney transplants, etc. So from the early 90s, Palestinians and like prominent, very credible Palestinians, including senior medical professionals in the West Bank and Gaza were shouting from the rooftops that Palestinians held in Israeli custody, whether that was after they'd been killed or just as a result of some minor infraction like throwing a stone at a tank, say, for which you can get years in jail even if you're a child in the West Bank. The Palestinians were being returned to them with very clear signs that their bodies had been raided for organs. They would have scars or other features which made it quite clear that yes, they had been subject to the theft of human material. Let's put it that way. And that's not just vital organs. That can include skin, bone, etc. Now, these warnings and declarations from Palestinians, they fell on deaf ears for many years, and they were considered. The Israeli government did its usual thing of saying this is an anti-Semitic blood libel. And you fast forward to the early 2000s, and there was a forensic pathologist called Yehuda Hiss, who is the head of Israel's forensic institute. It's called Abu Kabir, named after the illegal settlement in which it is based. And he openly admitted that yes, that actually we do this. We do basically harvest organs and human material from Palestinians, particularly during autopsies. Now, it must be noted that Yehuda Hiss was not only never punished after admitting this, he got promoted and a salary rise. Adding 2 and 2, it's quite clear, that what he was doing was state directed. Now, there's a woman called Myra Weiss, she was formerly worked at the Institute, and she exposed in a 2014 book called Over Their Dead Bodies that this was absolutely standard practice for Palestinian casualties from fighting for Palestinian prisoners, to have their organs harvested. And she records how during the first Intifada, which is become the first major mass Palestinian uprising against Zionist oppression from the late 80s until the early 90s, the Zionist occupation force officials explicitly told the center to just liberally harvest organs from every Palestinian corpse that comes your way, and do so with total impunity, take whatever you wish. And horrifically, people working at the Institute nostalgically refer to this period as the good old days or the good days, because there were no limits on what they could do and what they could steal. Absolutely horrendous stuff. Now, we fast forward to today, and the Zionist entity has at intermittent intervals released the bodies of Palestinians that they've killed, or indeed in some cases have seized from hospital mass graves built at those hospitals as they carry out this 21st century Holocaust in Gaza. In many cases, the bodies show very clear signs of their organs having been stolen. In other cases, the bodies are so badly decomposed that it's basically impossible to conduct an autopsy on them and therefore identify whether their organs are still intact. Sometimes the corpses are frozen absolutely rock solid, having been held at -70 temperatures, which again greatly complicates medical examinations. And ever since then, there have been numerous trades of bodies, or the release of some of the Palestinian corpses that are held by Israeli authorities. I might add as well that there are laws in Israel which specifically allow Israel it gives Israeli authorities the power to refuse to release dead Palestinians to their families, which is like a breach of several major international legal conventions. For instance, the Fourth Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits looting or mutilating dead bodies during wartime, but Tel Aviv not only has failed to ratify this treaty, but rejects its applicability to Gaza and the West Bank. So they have their own kind of self-authored legal justification for holding on to all these bodies. Now, I mean, in some cases they're used as bargaining chips, but in others, yes, they will be used for organ harvesting. Now, the reason I was moved to write about this is at the start of October, there was an Israeli-Ukrainian called aptly named Boris Wolfman. I kid you not. He was deported from Turkey, where he'd been living at liberty despite being wanted in multiple countries for illegal organ trafficking conspiracies. And he was deported to Russia, and he's faces numerous criminal charges and is likely to go to jail for a very long time. And on the one hand, that's a positive development, because some justice might be served in a number of major organ trafficking scandals dating back many, many years in which he was involved. It could shed some light on who he was collaborating and cooperating with, which in turn could possibly lead to more arrests, more investigations. But I'm not actually holding out masses of hope for that, because one of the conspiracies in which he was engaged, it's known as the Medicus scandal. Now, the Medicus clinic was based in Pristina in Kosovo, and in October 2008, local authorities unraveled a organ trafficking conspiracy taking place in this kind of remote and rather run-down medical center on the outskirts of Kosovo's capital. And the kind of the thread that unraveled this was a young Turkish man collapsed at Pristina airport, and he was subject to a medical examination, and doctors found that he had this fresh surgical scar in his abdomen, and he explained that he'd had his kidney removed at the clinic, and then basically just been told to leave and given no adequate aftercare or medical assistance whatsoever. And there was a raid on the centre, and it was discovered that there was a number of notorious figures, including this Turkish doctor called Yusuf Somnez, who is known as the world's most renowned, perhaps that should be notorious, organ trafficker. And they sourced clientele from the world over, but primarily from Israel. And people would pay in excess of $100,000 for transplants. Then patients would spend a period in recovery before being discharged and sent home. In many cases, donors, on top of not receiving inadequate kind of post-organ extraction treatment, they weren't given the money that they were promised that they would be given. They would be lured to Kosovo with promises that you could get up to $30,000, and Medicus had employed recruiters in places like Brazil and Romania to get poor, desperate people to volunteer to become organ donors, and they were given documents written in Albanian to sign that weren't translated to them. So I mean, it was a fraud from top to bottom, and a particularly grisly and grotesque one. But this is just one example among many in which the criminal trail leads back to Israel. In some cases, the kind of state protection for the people involved and state involvement in running these efforts is quite clear. In other others it's slightly more opaque. In my investigation, I note that there was a July 2015 European Parliament report on the growth of organ trafficking since the year 2000, and it attributed this exponential rise explicitly to Israeli physicians, and it contains this rather I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so disturbing and macabre. It's like this international map of transnational organ trafficking networks, and it's like this global spider web just being spun out of Israel, both in terms of, yes, clientele, but also the individuals and groups running these enterprises. It's all emanating from Israel, and there are multiple case studies contained in this report of completely illegal organ trafficking enterprises, and in all but one cited example, the Israelis were heavily involved. And so and bear in mind, I mentioned Sonmez, who is this this very highly notorious Turkish physician who was wanted, much like Wolfman, in multiple countries, lived freely and openly in Turkey nonetheless for some years after Medicus got busted. Local prosecutors wanted to jail him for 171 years, but he never served a day in prison and has vanished without trace. I wonder where to.
Wow. As somebody who's had 2 kidneys removed, it's easier than putting one in, but there obviously requires aftercare. And there's been no consequences for any of this. Like, for all intents and purposes, they've been able to run this network without any international pressure, any international attention to the issue, short of somebody writing a paper on it saying, hey, there seems to be an organ trafficking network coming out of Israel. But there's been no consequences, no legal consequences for the people involved in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might add as well that another case I didn't personally get into, I didn't get into this for reasons of space, but there was not too long ago, less than 20 years ago, in the US, there was it was revealed that there was a Jewish physician. His name was Rosenbaum. What's his first name? Oh God, I'm sorry, for some reason. Levi Isaac Rosenbaum. He got picked up by the FBI for organ trafficking and theft in Brooklyn, New York. He ran an organ trafficking ring which spanned multiple countries, employing American doctors, hospitals both in the US and outside, with medical authorities basically bribed to keep quiet about things. This was like a massive international conspiracy. And it kind of flew under the radar. Rosenbaum got a very, very, very light sentence. I think it was only a few years, and he kind of got he got 2.5 years in jail and a very, very modest fine for running this criminal conspiracy from which he must have made absolutely millions. And he was in close contact with several people who crop up in other major organ trafficking conspiracies as well. So it's like it's a kind of incestuous web of people who were involved in this, and they all once one, in the manner of a hydra, once one conspiracy gets busted, they just move on to the next one. So so it's like Wolfman, while he was this wanted man in multiple jurisdictions and subject to an Interpol red notice and living in Turkey freely and openly, he kickstarted another organ trafficking venture targeting vulnerable Kenyans. And yet again, they were given inadequate medical assistance after extraction, and they were not given the money that was promised to them. And he just kept on going on and on and on. And it does, like, given that you would think that this is, because this is completely illegal, in pretty much every legal jurisdiction in the entire world, you would think that this was a very high stakes, high risk operation to pull off. But suspiciously, not so much. Actually, people tend to get away with this, and again, that does raise the spectre of whether these people are being protected, and if so, by whom, and whether this is being done, say, in conjunction with intelligence agencies. They would have an interest in this, perhaps as a way of laundering money or other nefarious activities, and it's not something that's really been talked about with any seriousness until the Gaza genocide began, because finally, by God, finally, Palestinians are able to show the world the corpses that are being returned to them from Israeli custody. And it is fairly clear that things are being done to them, whether they're alive or dead, while they're in there. It is genuinely, truly sickening. But it just speaks to the total impunity with which Israel operates, in general, in every regard. They have absolutely zero concern for international law. They have zero concern for repercussions of any nature for what they're doing, for carrying out a live stream genocide. Why would they care about having a bit of an income stream? Yeah, having an income stream on the side from stealing organs. Despite the fact that it's kind of writ so large and it's been exposed to such a degree, I think the prospects of anyone actually facing serious consequences for this are pretty much nil. I think I might be pronouncing it wrong, but all of the various detention camps that Israel operates, often for just innocent civilians. They've decided to brand terrorists for no legitimate reason, and kind of scooped off the street and thrown in cells. They're subject to widespread kind of industrial scale psychological and physical torture, and the UN has documented this in report after report after report. And there were token efforts to hold some Zionist occupation force perpetrators to account, and then this prompted mass protests from Israelis that their heroes were being unjustly prosecuted, and Israeli politicians condemned their legal actions against them in the harshest possible terms, and there's no sign of them actually going to trial. At least we do have confirmation now, that the Palestinians gain a measure of vindication for whatever it's worth, that what they've been saying for decades is completely true.
Are they selling these organs to other parts of the world? Like when they harvest these organs in Israel and Palestine, is this one of those things where they're selling it to the US, to Europe, etc.? And it's kind of like a worldwide organ network of sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned, I would urge, at the risk of self-promotion, I would urge people to check out my piece, but also that aforementioned 2015 report, because like I say, it's completely crazy. That bearing in mind that Israel is smaller than Wales, It's this tiny scrap of land. It is the world center for organ trafficking, with tendrils extending into every continent. There are numerous countries that have been used as centers for this. For instance, there was a very public case in South Africa, which was busted in 2003. It was one of the biggest. It was one of South Africa's biggest private hospitals, called Netcare, and they not only were Israeli individuals getting clientele for illegal transplant operations at this hospital, they were busing people in from all over the world for the purpose, including children. It must be stated. And then, but because allegedly due to jurisdictional issues involved, little to no justice was ever served in this case. There was a very lengthy, almost 10-year-long investigation into what went down, and in the end, Netcare paid a $1 million fine. The perpetrators escaped without, the mildest slap on the wrist.
Because, in order to get a transplant, you have to have a hospital, you have to have a doctor, you have to have staff, you have to have all of these things that are built into it. For a doctor to be part of a hospital, he has to have licenses. He has to have an association with that particular hospital. So this can't be something where you just have a one-man band pulling off. This is to be networks of people involved in order to make something like this work. And for them to be able to do this all across the world, that is astonishing. That is, and by the way, it's not poor people buying organs.
No.
Right? It's not, guy making $45,000 a year buying $100,000 kidney. It's not working that way. So I would imagine part of the reason that there's very little consequences because of the people who they're selling it to. The wealth of the world.
There is that aspect to it as well. And it's you got to bear in mind that, some of these operations cost up to $200,000. Which is a sum out of the budget of the overwhelming majority of the populations of the supposedly wealthy West. So it's in the manner of Epstein. Perhaps as an analogy, if you've got the money for something, you can get it, and Israel seems to have a preponderant tendency for providing these highly illegal services, whether that's child prostitution, whether that's illegal organ transplants. Israel is a major producer of GHB, which is a very common date rape drug, and it speaks to this wider sickness within Israeli society that's kind of only become blasted onto television screens or YouTube streams globally since October 7th. So again, it's there is this awareness now that Israel is not this plucky underdog democracy surrounded by evil backward Muslims who hate them and want to kill them because they're Jews. It's actually this deeply sick society, which is it has with the world's highest proportion of rapists per square mile by far of any country in the world, and it is a crying pity that it has taken a live stream genocide for this to become apparent to the overwhelming majority of the world. For people like myself who've been writing about Palestine since I was, in my teens, this is not so shocking. But you mentioned in the introduction, this is hardly shocking what's happening. I would say that the details of this particular kind of transnational criminal enterprise, they do remain, deeply disquieting and disturbing. And bearing in mind, this is just what we know about, and so that will be the absolute tip of the iceberg. And so I mean, what happens next? Again, sadly, probably nothing. I mean, we've seen what's happened with attempts by the ICC to issue arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. They were the court and its staff were personally sanctioned to the extent that they couldn't log into their Microsoft accounts. So I rounded my piece off by stating this, but it's like, I do think that there is an element of complicity from Western countries that, well, they kind of know this is happening, but they're just willing to they're willing to turn a blind eye because, hey, it's Israel, so we for one reason or another, we're not going to say anything.
Wow, yeah, that's an understatement. Turning a blind eye. Palestinians have been saying this for years, and I've been hearing whispers of it, right? Where you could hear people pointing out they're stealing organs. And it's like, okay, well, is it true? Is it false? Unclear. I'm glad you did this piece. It's a big deal. One of the other things I want to hit you with before I let you go, the quote unquote stabilization force that they are now going to impose, or at the very least try to impose upon Gaza. Hamas has come out and very clearly stated this is a non-starter for us. This doesn't abide by any principles of the Palestinian people. It's basically a colonial effort. It's like a Balfour document 2.0 in the way that they are trying to impose Tony Blair, Donald Trump, let's say governments that were completely complicit in one sense, paying for the genocide outright. And in another sense, one of the governments that were complicit in the genocide itself. Tony Blair is a warmonger in and of himself. But you're imposing this on a group and a population of people at the behest of the Israeli government. Give me your take on this. I mean, for one, do you think this is ever going to come to pass? Do you think this even works?
I mean, the short answer is a big fat no. I mean, and I think as well, what's quite, I think that the British role in this is really quite interesting because I've written about this for my website, and I've actually got more stuff on this coming. But the UK for many years was formally committed to a quote unquote two-state solution. Now, of course, from a practical and point of view, this was a non-starter because Gaza and the West Bank are not contiguous. To say the least, they are completely separate. They have separate legal systems, separate political systems, and it is difficult, if not impossible, for residents of one territory to get to the other. So there was never going to be a kind of unified Palestinian state worthy of the name. But what Britain was trying to do in supporting a quote unquote two-state solution was extend the Palestinian Authority's well, for want of a better word, authority over Gaza. Now, the Palestinian Authority is this kind of brutal Zionist appendage, which it basically does Israel's dirty work for them. In the West Bank, they have a very brutal security force which kidnaps, tortures, and imprisons Palestinian residents of the West Bank on non-existent charges. They are trained by the British in the art of killing and routinely deployed to carry out brutal crackdowns against Palestinian resistance in the West Bank. But the London's objective was to, yes, extend this illegitimate. I mean, it must be. I must add that like zero Palestinian support the Palestinian Authority. It has absolutely zero credibility or legitimacy with anyone it claims to govern. And so they were trying to extend Palestinian Authority control to Gaza, this was in itself a non-starter because of the strength of Hamas at the time. Now, Hamas has emerged from the genocide in Gaza stronger and more popular than ever. And they are not going to willingly disarm. They are not willingly going to rescind power. I mean, particularly on the latter point, they have stated they're open to dialogue, but various conditions must be met before they consider even consider any terms dictated by foreign powers. Now, I mean, the 20-point plan that Trump has released for ending the war in Gaza is just, I mean, it's complete nonsense, and it would require the deployment of masses of soldiers from numerous different countries, including Britain, to Gaza to try and enforce this. It's just not going to happen. Like, I mean, if you think about all of the toing and froing and all of the kind of farcical, it's like a farcical game of Pong that's been played over whether the EU could deploy a peacekeeping force to Ukraine. Imagine that, but significantly maximized. The residents of Gaza will reject it, just reflexively. Hamas will reject it reflexively. So you're just creating, yet another quagmire in West Asia, which will eat up a lot of resources. Will probably just be if it is implemented, which is doubtful, it will just ignite a major quote unquote civil war in Gaza, with Gazans and Hamas on one side, and whichever foreign countries is stupid enough to deploy their own forces there on the other, and it won't end. And I might add as well that absent from any consideration of this, this plan's practicalities, you've got to bear in mind that Gaza is basically unlivable now. It is I think it's by UN estimates, it's like 80% of its buildings have been reduced to rubble. Right.
Yep.
So it's like the cleanup operation to clear the all of the debris, and of course that's going to be a difficult job in itself, because there will be so many Palestinians bodies left in this in the devastation. I saw a study earlier this year by an academic journal that it concluded that that Gaza is home to at least 39 million tons of rubble. Removing it would generate over 90,000 tons of greenhouse gas and take up to 4 decades to complete. Clearing the wreckage would be the equivalent of dump trucks traveling the Earth's circumference 800 times or something. So I mean, there's not much of Gaza left to reside in, let alone police. And particularly when you factor in that Hamas's tunnel system, which they use to devastating effect whenever the Zionist occupation forces actually dared to step into Gaza. They suffered serious casualties and losses each and every time they actually tried to fight a ground war in Gaza. The possibilities for resistance are significant. And I mean, it's this, you can totally see, Tony Blair sat in one of his many kind of palatial, expensive homes, dreaming of this future Gaza. But the reality is it will be a total mess in every conceivable regard. And I think as well that I was kind of surprised that the resolution backing this passed without any resistance. Perhaps there is an element, and I'm not trying to go the route suggesting that Russia and China are playing 5D chess here, but there could have been an element of, well, let's let the West paint themselves into a corner and create problems for them.
Well, I was going to ask you about that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask you about that. Why do you think China? Because China and Russia gave a stern condemnation of it, a strongly worded statement, and then they voted to abstain, which effectively allowed it to go through without the UN Security Council veto from either one of the countries. I've spoken to people in the Middle East; they're pissed off, very angry that Russia and China allowed this to go through. I guess the question is, why do you think they allowed it to go through? Is it really just, we don't believe this is going to work, and so why are we going to stand in the way and risk political capital with the Arab communities or the Arab countries? Or do you think there's another reason associated with it? Some people made the argument of back channel dealing, that Russia and China got something out of it. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a lot of anger, indeed, and it mustn't be forgotten that Russia and Israel actually do have quite a close relationship, China, despite the fact that it has maintained solidarity with the Palestinians, it has its own economic and political interests in and with Israel as well. So it looks like that Russia and China were, at least on paper, willing to countenance some kind of stabilization force, except they wanted it to take a different form from what was being proposed, and they also were not happy about Trump's so-called board of peace, which is in Orwellian terms the exact opposite of what it claims to be. Yes. But yeah, I mean, there could be an element of laying a trap for Western powers in this, because I'm sure that there are elements within Western countries, again particularly Britain, I would say, who would be kind of gung-ho about doing this, and willing to supply soldiers and material to try and make this happen, and then it just won't. I mean, it would be another Vietnam, I think. So, I mean, maybe that's one aspect of it, but I think that again, sympathy and pity for the Palestinians is absolutely bottomless, because I mean, no one's coming to their rescue at all. Like, Arab states are all paid off, led by comprador regimes who will do whatever the West tells them. Like China and Russia are not coming to the rescue. Iran is, I think, playing a very long game, perhaps too long, of wait and see on this, and there's no suggestion that they're going to be deploying stabilization, quote unquote, forces to Gaza themselves to counterpoise the international coalition that's allegedly going to police and enforce this. So I mean, there are like no good options as a result of this. I mean, just about the only positive, and it's certainly not something to be celebrated necessarily, is the fact that the sheer level of environmental destruction that's been wrought in Gaza, with its water is poisoned, its air is poisoned, its soil is poisoned. We're not going to get Gaza Largo. So that's the silver lining. That's the silver lining. But I mean, the reality is, in lieu of Gaza Largo, we have Gaza as it is now, which is an uninhabitable wasteland, which is hazardous to human health. So I mean, we'll see what comes of this. I mean, as I say, I don't put it past certain players to try and enforce this, but I suspect that the result will be a 2-week deployment that ends with them running away with their tail between their legs. Just a total disaster all round.
You really think the Europeans will be willing to put troops in Gaza? I mean, I know Indonesia has said that they're willing to put several thousand troops. And I don't know about the Turks. I don't know about the Egyptians. I don't know about the Saudis. Meaning, this is supposed to be one of the things that they're talking about, a stabilization force. I don't know who's going to play that role of a stabilization force, quote unquote. Also, how are they going to disarm Hamas? There's that. Israel committed a genocide and still wasn't able to disarm Hamas. And yet we're expecting rando actors to come into and do this. Like, there's so many parts of this that I don't have an answer to. Even this idea of who's going to pay for it. As you pointed out, all of these tons of rubble that have been created with 80% of the buildings destroyed. Okay, who's going to spend, I don't know, $100 billion to put money into removing that rubble with a quote unquote return on investment at some point later into the future? I don't have an answer to any of these questions.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that the West doesn't either. And this is what I mean about how there are no good options at all. I mean, I think that the reason that I believe or suspect, maybe I'm wrong. The reason I suspect that certain European powers would be willing to do this is because of how significant Israel is to overall Western strategy and objectives in West Asia. Yeah. And they want it they don't want this is an interesting observation, is that if you look at polls of residents of the West Bank where Hamas is not active, Hamas is really popular with the local population. So I mean, I think that Western powers have every interest in trying to neutralize Hamas before the group's influence and popularity increases any further elsewhere. Not only within the West Bank, but also just the region in general. There is a significant risk. They are viewed very widely throughout West Asia, as far as I can tell, as courageous freedom fighters who have successfully fought off the Zionist occupation forces pretty consistently and very daringly in a totally asymmetrical battle. But then by the same token, I don't think that there is a concrete end strategy here beyond, I mean, maybe for a few weeks generating headlines, positive media headlines that, oh well, yeah, the British are in Gaza and they're helping, and with accompanying pictures of British soldiers smiling with Palestinian children. I mean, that's what the Western elites are interested in at this point, is like short-term propaganda victories which sound or look impressive but are actually kind of meaningless. I mean, somewhat unrelated, but I mean, earlier this week there was a kind of brief explosion of excitement over the fact that Ukraine signed a deal with France to buy 200 fighter jets
with no money.
And then yeah. But then when you actually look at the details, A, they have no money, and B, the jets will be delivered in 2035. When Ukraine won't exist anymore.
2035? Are you serious?
Yeah. But that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Is that they genuinely this is all they're focused on is public relations and getting these transitory victories in the hope, and perhaps in the hope that they'll be promptly forgotten and on to the next thing when it doesn't materialize. Trump has, despite the fact that he's launched various wars, exacerbated numerous conflicts, and is openly talking about now invading Mexico. still wants to act like he's a deal maker, that he's a peacemaker, and that the focus on in media reporting on this stabilization force is that it's based on Trump's vision, Trump's plan, blah blah blah. Really, I don't think there is much of a plan, if at all, beyond we'll say things which sound impressive but actually can't be realized in actual real life, and wouldn't work even if they could be. As I say, a gigantic mess, and the ultimate victims, as always, are going to be the poor Palestinians. We still need to keep speaking up for them, because despite this alleged, again, this ceasefire that quote unquote that was announced with much fanfare, it lasted about a day before Israel started, carrying out indiscriminate attacks yet again in Gaza, and killing Palestinians who were trying to get food and other aid from Western suppliers on the ground and that sort of thing. And it's just like it's all for show. But now that there's a quote unquote ceasefire, the media has ceased being so interested in what's happening in Gaza, but the slaughter continues apace. So it's like, okay, well, we've got this stabilization plan, fantastic, okay, but then it's like, well, when it actually comes to implementation, will it get past initial discussions? Will a single foreign boot tread in Gaza? That is very, very doubtful. And I wouldn't even suggest that we're at a crossroads now. I just think that Israel is off leash. They've gotten away with this, to such a degree that Netanyahu is basically openly boasting about how well the war, from our perspective, the war isn't over. That's not getting media coverage. The Knesset recently voted to formally and permanently annex the West Bank and mark it out as Israeli territory. There was open discussion about annexing parts of Lebanon and maybe other neighboring countries as well. And they know no limits, because nobody is, apart from Hamas, is actually standing up to them. I think that a quagmire, a kind of irreconcilable quagmire has been created here, and I can't see any concrete results emerging from this UN vote, and as I say, any attempt to implement it is going to be very robustly opposed, perhaps with arms and explosives. But we shall see, I suppose.
Yeah. Ancillary to this, Prince Bonesaw was in the United States. I was traveling when Khashoggi was chopped up with a bone saw in the Turkish embassy. And I remember it was on every television, like everywhere, every country I would jump into, it was front page news. Khashoggi, journalists for Washington Post, chopped up with a bone saw. And to make it even worse, he was at the Saudi embassy in Turkey because he was trying to get a marriage certificate to marry his girlfriend, which makes it even worse, right? He's like, he did it for love, even though he knew he was going into hostile territory, to put it mildly. And he ended up being right that it was indeed hostile territory. They left her standing outside when she effectively knocked on the door saying, "Hey, where's my boyfriend?" They were like, "We have no idea what you're talking about." And obviously Erdogan had the place bugged, and so he knew exactly what took place. So Prince Bonesaw is at the White House. Trump has decided to sell F-35s to him. Obviously, he's getting something out of this. What Donald Trump wants is him to sign on to the Abraham Accords. Listen to his answer when the Abraham Accords comes up. Listen very closely to what he says here, because it doesn't sound like Donald Trump is going to get what he wants on this.
But I think you have a very good feeling for the Abraham Accords.
Just definitely, Mr. President, we want peace for the Israelis, we want peace for the Palestinians, we want them to coexist peacefully in the region, and we will do all this to reach that lead. And the defense agreement.
But
basically, that's not a yes. that's anything but a yes, right? He says, hey, I'll let you answer this question on the Abraham Accords. And his response to it is, hey, man, we want peace. We want the two-state solution. We want peace with the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want peace around the globe. We want ice cream. We want unicorns. We want all of those things. And so, yeah, thanks very much for that. He's not answering yes. It's amazing to me. And yet he's still getting the F-35s. He's apparently, Donald Trump has decided to give Saudi Arabia non-NATO alliance of sorts, meaning it's like the closest thing to NATO that you could get without it being NATO in regards to some kind of defense treaty with the United States. Why is Trump giving all of these goodies and still not getting what he wants? And do you think he's serious about the whole two-state solution? I got to be honest with you. I've considered the two-state solution a shiny object. As you pointed out, the West Bank and Gaza are not contiguous. Like, if you look at a map, these things are far apart, with Israel has settlements all between. What is going on with this? I mean, is this for political consumption at home, in his case, because he realizes that most of his public is against this notion of formalizing a relationship with Israel, especially as they continue to commit murder on a massive scale? Give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Trump is, of course, very fond of big shiny deals, and I think as well that this probably ties in with his hope to get some kind of resolution to the war in Gaza, because you got to bear in mind that one of the triggers for October 7th was Saudi Arabia was on the verge of recognizing Israel, which has been a long-term objective of successive U.S. administrations. They hadn't gotten very little headway had been made, and it got to the point where Prince Bonesaw, excellent name, the branded ice cream bars, surely not far behind. That it got to the point where MBS was basically threatened, saying, "We are going to withdraw all military and intelligence support for you if you don't recognize Israel." So that was one of the reasons that one of many reasons that Hamas launched Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, and it has placed the Saudis in a very, very difficult position, because bin Salman makes a big play of how Saudi Arabia is the heart and the soul and the brains of the entire Muslim world, which that encompasses pretty much every continent in the world, in the world. And given that 100% of Muslims support the Palestinians and loathe Israel viscerally, that is a very tricky balancing act for bin Salman. So I suspect that this deal is on top of getting some kind of propaganda win and saying, oh well, we've got all this money coming in and I've brokered the deal of the century, blah blah blah. It's also a way of trying to get MBS on side with the occupation plan, but B as well, recognition of Israel. And I think the fact that Trump, in typically brash style, used the opportunity to slam Khashoggi. He said that he said of Khashoggi, he was someone that a lot of people didn't like. So it was almost like he was saying to MBS, hey, it's all fine, it's all good, and he literally said things happen. So he was,
right,
he was
for Khashoggi.
Yeah. And it's just like, I think the Khashoggi murder was quite. It was horrific. But what was quite interesting is that yes, as you say, that they wanted to use Turkey because Turkey is even though it is a core NATO member, it's very much viewed as a neutral country, and it does maintain relationships with East and West, and acts. You know, I mean, it was Turkey that was at the forefront of peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. That must never be forgotten. And so the Saudis thought, well, because this is kind of neutral territory, we can get away with doing this. And Erdogan was like, not having it. And specifically exposed them. So it's like, I think this was Trump's way of saying, no hard feelings, everything's well, you can rely on us, now sign on the dotted line and say that you recognize Israel. It was way of kind of like, greasing the wheels of that. I mean, again, I'm not so sure that the MBS is actually going to do it, because he realizes that he holds the cards in that. The US needs him to recognize Israel, perhaps more than he needs the US's military and intelligence backing, because multipolar world, there are other avenues of cooperation, there are other allies that you can have. Large number of countries the world over are turning to Russia and China, an ever increasing number. BRICS is gaining in strength and members all the time. We have seen substantively warming relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and their conflict kind of lay at the core of the mess in West Asia over the past 15 years. To a large extent, with them backing different proxies in different countries. So it's like, I think this is perhaps a last-ditch effort by Trump to get the Saudis fully into the Western camp, but Riyadh knows that it can afford to play both sides, because we're living in a very different world now than we were.
Yeah, Kit. Agreed. I just thought it was funny. Trump is trying hard to be like, all right, I'm going to put him on the spot. And for all intents and purposes, MBS. I mean, there were a few things in the interview that at times MBS seemed uncomfortable, especially when Donald Trump was talking about attacking Iran. And he is like, MBS sitting there, and Trump is like, yeah, we agree on everything. And when I attacked Iran and did all of this stuff, and MBS is sitting there like, dude, will you shut up? Will you shut up? This is not doing me well. Kit, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it, man. Kit Klarenberg. And by the way, I'm going to put your article below so the audience can read it for themselves. Kit does damn good work. And I often ask you, when I get the opportunity to read your pieces, in fact, there are a few journalists who I bring on when I read their pieces, because I think it just fits very well within the context of the show. And I like to give publicity to the work that the journalists are doing, and you're one of them. So thank you for this. Kit Klarenberg,
God bless you.
Well, no, thank you, man. Investigative journalist documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perceptions. You can find Kit's work at Global Delinquents and thegrayzone.uk. Kit, you have a good rest of your day, man. Be safe.
You too. Take care, Jamal. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Thank you. Bye-bye. Shout out to Kit. And my next guest is here. I just heard him pop in. Patrick Henningsen. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Yeah, very well, Jamal. Very well. That was quick connection.
Yeah. Hey, well,
straight in
Kit
there.
Kit had just finished, and so it was like I heard you just pop in immediately. I just bring you right on in.
Okay, great.
Patrick Henningsen. He is geopolitical analyst, journalist, host of the SundayWire.com, creator of 21st Century Wire, and critic of mainstream media's propaganda. I'm glad that you could join me, man. I don't know if you've seen this. This came out, I think it was today, if I'm not mistaken. But they are now having this conversation about a new quote-unquote peace plan. Mm-hmm. And so there are several things that are taking place at once. One, Zelensky is being effectively rolled with a corruption scandal by Nabu and Sapo. This is always fascinating to me because corruption is endemic in Ukraine. And yet Nabu and Sapo all of a sudden just popped into fruition in regard to like, hey, there's gambling here. We're going to now pay attention to the gambling that's taking place in this establishment that doesn't supposed to be here. Mm-hmm. And so they have been going after Zelensky's inner circle And it is widely believed, and I have no reason to believe that they're wrong on this, that Zelensky is directly related and intimate to this particular scheme of $100 million. Let's be honest with you. Let's be honest, right? Ukraine has gotten billions, and you can imagine that a lot of that money has been embezzled elsewhere. And so $100 million seems like small change, but it seems to be the thing that has been circling Zelensky around the drain. I'll put it that way, where you have multiple articles saying Zelensky is out of touch. Zelensky is out of touch with reality. I think that was the Telegraph. They recently had their article coming out saying Zelensky is out of touch with reality. There's some articles coming out saying Zelensky should resign. There's the belief that Yermak is going to be dismissed within a day or so. We'll see if that takes place. And around all of this, you have the Trump administration coming up saying, by the way, we are now coming up with a new peace plan. And Politico has come up with an article. They said the White House wants to agree on a framework to document an end to the war with Ukraine and Russia by the end of November, or even the end of this week. This is what the newspaper is reporting. The, quote, 28-point peace plan that the United States and the Russia Special Representative Witkoff and Dmitriev discussed with the United States. Quote, it seems the plan will be presented to Zelensky as a fait accompli. And at a meeting in Kiev, unquote, the publication writes, the U.S. administration claims that they are, quote, on the verge of a serious breakthrough, unquote. Quote, what we are going to offer Ukraine is reasonable, unquote, says an official. Trump team believe that Zelensky, under pressure, will be forced to accept what is offered to him. And the last one, quote, as for the rest of Europe, we basically don't care about the Europeans, unquote, says the official. What do you make of this? I mean, because the reason why I put these two stories together is because there's a question of who was behind trying to get rid of Zelensky and whether that was the White House, considering the White House has been basically quiet as a church mouse as all of this has been unfolding. It is the belief that NABU is a U.S. institution. And so if it's going after Zelensky, it is the United States that is effectively going after, trying to damage the credibility of Zelensky. Other people disbelieve that. I don't know. Give me your take on this. Do you take this quote unquote negotiation as being legitimate?
Let's just start with the negotiations and work our way back. The 28-point peace plan. Like, why stop at 28? Why not make it 30, 31, or maybe 38? Maybe make it 47. I don't know. Why not make it like 74 points or whatever? It's a joke. So this is the same type of the way the Trump administration do these so-called negotiations is they decide everything themselves in absentia of the other parties, and then they present it as a fait accompli. And if somebody doesn't like it or has any problems with it, then Trump will throw his hands up in true Israeli style and say it's a perfectly good deal, and they rejected it. So they're basically, the U.S. has basically become Israel in terms of its pattern of negotiations, which aren't real negotiations, and quite frankly, they're not serious. So what do I derive from this is that they're saying this now. They're in serious talks with Russia about bringing the conflict to an end. Well, they've been in serious talks with Russia at least 6 or 7 different junctures in the first year of this presidency, and it resulted in what? It has netted what? Nothing. And so I personally don't expect, and again, I'm a terrible interview subject for this because all the shows want to run with the headlines and say they finally done it. They finally done it. I don't think it's that Trump could flip-flop by Monday and then flip-flop again the following Monday, and next month be in a wholly different place altogether, and then come back before Christmas and say they've got the deal to end all deals. So the problem is here, it's not just Trump. There's nothing that the U.S. can say or do short of an embargo for weapons and support for Ukraine that would prevent the Europeans, the British, or the Ukrainian hard right with Zelensky as their current puppet from basically thwarting everything or doing some gallant raid on Russian territory that kicks the can down the road until further in 2026 to buy time for the Europeans to steal the Russian assets. because that's the last pot of gold, basically. It's frozen Russian assets in Euroclear and in the various and sundry European central banks like France and a few others. 180 billion or in Belgium in the clearinghouse. They haven't been touched yet, although they're in the process of trying to collateralize them in order to raise money through various interest-bearing schemes. But they really want to just take it, because if they take the Russian assets, they'll use it for a couple. It'll last. Some of that money will keep the show going for at least a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe two. But the whole point, Europe's. I'll come back to Zelensky's corruption in a minute. But what you have to understand is that Brussels is coming up with a new scheme every month to basically sell this war. And you remember sort of 4 or 5 months ago, it was, oh, we've got this $800 billion plan to rebuild Europe's defenses, and Germany's going to be at the hub of this, and we're going to increase the budgets and budget deficits of the main European NATO states, and that's going to pay for this rearmament of Europe to confront Russia by the year 2028 or whatever it is. And so they ditched that because that was a non-starter, as I and others said at the time, because they're not going to be able to necessarily get the green light to go into budget deficit first and foremost, and let alone the procurement process and what's actually going to be done with that money, and when are the deliveries going to arrive of the weapons, and what's Ukraine going to get, what's Germany going to get, and so forth. All of those are open questions, just running in infinitum into the future. So that's not going to happen. But this latest one's called the SAFE instrument, SAFE, one of these. They're running out of acronyms, but it's a SAFE instrument. And this one is a beauty. This one's a beauty. This one is war bonds. So Brussels is going to issue war bonds, these interest-bearing instruments, and then they're going to use them to raise money, and they're going to take that money and they're going to loan it to the member states to buy weapons for themselves and Ukraine. So it's called the joint procurement system. And the whole thing is underwritten by the hope, the dream that Russia is going to pay war reparations when they lose. Believe it or not, that is the deal. That's everything's riding on that. So this is obviously thin ice. Okay. So that's why there is this gang rush to steal Russian assets. So when you see Macron doing these signing ceremonies with Zelensky for these arms deals, they're phantom arms deals. There's no arms, there's no money, there's no deal. All it is an MOU of a promise that they're going to be doing this and that and the other in the next 10 years. Zelensky's going to be long gone by then, one way or another. So all of this is just theater to keep this story going for European electorates. As far as the U.S. is concerned, Donald Trump has shown a proven record of caving and going back on every single statement that he's made since he's come in this term. And so if he says, I want peace, then the Europeans and the British come, or something happens. And if he goes to Alaska, to Anchorage, he says, yeah, we're on our way to getting a deal. And then all of a sudden he's talking about attacking Russia, and he is threatening Russia with this, that, and pledging more support for Ukraine. It just keeps going back and forth because Trump believes this is his negotiation tactic, is to keep upping the ante and being more aggressive. And somehow he's going to get concessions and negotiation concessions by doing that. And meanwhile, the U.S. top military brass, as well as the European brass and the British and so forth, believe that they can ride this out, and that they just need more time to prepare the next generation drone tech that they'll use to swarm Russia and basically paralyze their government in Moscow, possibly achieve regime change. And by doing this they'll win the war of attrition in terms of technological warfare. That is the absolute belief at the British level and at the European level. That's the absolute belief. They are 100% on board with this. But there's a few X factors that would cause this to collapse. One of them is the lack of mobilization of able-bodied males from Ukraine to fight in the interim. That's obviously something that's not going well for Ukraine. That's already hit the wall. If not, it's going to really slam into the wall soon. The other is the political time clock on Zelensky. That's another. And so now this corruption scandal is seeking to address that issue. The other is the political time clock in Europe, which is the European appetite for a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. Now, the corruption scandal, as you rightly point out, Jamal, the fact that it's come out of NABU. NABU is not a U.S. agency. NABU is a Ukrainian agency, but it's been micromanaged from its inception by the United States, by Victoria Nuland herself out of the U.S. Embassy, as it was put together in late 2013 and was then formalized after the Maidan coup in February 2014. And the idea behind NABU, and the only reason I understand this and know this is because we've done extensive reporting on Biden and Burisma corruption in Ukraine at 21st Century Wire, and we have probably one of the best archives on this topic. So I know that NABU was set up, and the United States had implanted their key people, U.S. loyalists and operatives, and informants inside NABU. The point of NABU, SAPU is the Ukrainian anti-corruption agency that is ostensibly a part of the Ukrainian government. You could say under Ukrainian control, as it were. NABU was designed, it's my opinion, and I'm not alone here, okay, that NABU was designed as a corruption surveillance agency, because what the U.S. was concerned about was they wanted to know what corruption was going on and be able to head off any potential investigations into corruption investigations that might implicate U.S.-friendly partners in Ukraine, specifically to do with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, Burisma, and all that whole sort of cartel that was involved in that. So that the U.S. was, playing anti-corruption, but there's some corruption that they approve of, that they want to protect, and especially Zelensky, anything that touches Zelensky, and then there's corruption that they want to basically shut down. Now, the fact that it's coming out of NABU means that the guardrails are off for Zelensky. That means that he has now been somewhat hung out to dry. It's a major warning shot to him that the protections aren't there. And that's understandable. I don't think this would have happened under a Biden presidency, personally. The fact that it's a Trump presidency means that they're a little less sort of diligent in protecting the trails of U.S.-linked corruption that's linked to Poroshenko and linked to Zelensky and Amos Hochstein and the reverse gas scam and all of this stuff, Burisma, all of it, because that could have really damaged the Democratic Party and Biden while he was in office. Not really the case anymore. People just want to move on. So, but nonetheless, it's a wildly corrupt country, as you rightly pointed out. But that doesn't mean there aren't patriots in Ukraine that have been within the parliamentary structure. I'll name a few: Konstantin Kulik, Andrei Derkash, Alexander Dubinsky, all of which are either thrown in jail by Zelensky or have fled the country because of threats to their life. Okay, any actual anti-corruption deputies in parliament were chased out of the country or thrown in jail. So all of these people have raised all these issues, even the Privat Bank scandal, which Kolomoisky is the oligarch that heads back to Zelensky's career. He's currently in prison. I personally think he's also in prison as protection to protect him by being in prison. Personally, he could easily be in Israel and be absolutely fine and above the law. But so there are anti-corruption people who used to be in Ukraine, and it's no longer safe for them to be in Ukraine. And many of them have been whistleblowers externally. And so credit where credit's due. Trump dispatched Rudy Giuliani, who personally I can't stand for various reasons. specifically due his support for Israel is just and his disdain for Palestinians and Arabs is shocking. But he did really good depositions and investigations with Victor Shokin, who was from the head of the General Prosecution's Office during Trump's first term. Giuliani was dispatched on a fact-finding mission to Ukraine and came back with the receipts. Plus, we had the release tapes from Poroshenko's office. He recorded everything and left all the tapes in there when Zelensky came. And Yermak probably leaked some of these tapes or allowed them to leak out as a type of an insurance policy for him and the Zelensky government against the U.S. and Biden should they turn to stab Zelensky in the back and enact regime change. So those tapes implicating Biden, which they clearly did. They clearly did. Joe Biden should have been impeached just on the basis of those tapes. But anyway, he managed to ride off into the sunset. So now we have a situation where they need to, plans are afoot, at least British-led plans, to replace Zelensky with Valery Zaluzhny, the former head of the Ukrainian armed forces. And he's currently in London. He's released his memoirs. He's wearing a Savile Row suit. They've improved his English. They've turned him from a thug and into this debonair, statesman in waiting. But there's a snag to this. Okay, the snag is, the Ukrainian plot, the fake story of the Ukrainian divers who blew up the Nord Stream, all 3 Nord Stream pipelines from a 50-foot sailboat. That one. Okay. If the Europeans are running with that conspiracy theory, then there has to be a chain of command who gave the orders from the Ukrainian armed forces, and the head of the armed forces at that time was Valery Zaluzhny. So he has effectively diplomatic immunity. This is another reason why he was sent to London. You see how this puzzle fits together. So they're trying to patch up the Nord Stream story. Zaluzhny, while he probably may or may not had something to do with the deployment of these 5 or 6 Ukrainian so-called super soldiers who trained in a quarry in Western Ukraine, somehow managed to parlay that into, it's a crazy story. But that red herring operation was assigned a budget, and they were sent off to create a distraction story. And somebody would have had knowledge of that, whether that was Budinov and the GRU or whatever, SBU. But Zaluzhny has been purposely put in the frame, you see. And this is the genius of this whole plot. And by doing that, they have motivated him to play this role, right? And to be the statesman in waiting, okay? And if he is parachuted into Kiev, he has double motivation to do what he's told. Otherwise, the Europeans could throw him under the bus and have him extradited to testify in Germany in the Nord Stream investigation. You see, that would be like the Hermann Goering kind of high-profile testimony, right? For Nord Stream, even though this Nord Stream plot is completely bogus and is clearly designed to distract away from NATO and Baltops 22, where the pipelines were prepped and detonated at the next NATO drill in September that year in 2022. So you can see all of this stuff is strung together, and all these points have to basically fire on the next one in order to make this work, because it's falling apart. It's falling apart from a military point of view. It's falling apart from a political point of view in Kiev and in Europe and in the US. And it's falling apart just on the sort of propaganda level as well. And the plot line is currently falling apart. So it's failing at all these levels. And the West, NATO, the US included, and the British and the Europeans have to all of these things have to sort of work out, because once one domino falls, the whole thing collapses. And I personally think Nord Stream is the Achilles heel. It's one of the big Achilles heels of the whole Ukraine story. And it really exposes a level of mendacity and hypocrisy between NATO members and the regime in Ukraine that is potentially would discredit this whole chapter of history. I mean, this is devastating for the West. So they have to keep all these fictions going. And the scary thing, Jamal, is that one of the big motivators on the West is they need to escalate. They need to escalate to keep the tensions high, to keep the fear high, and to make people choose between dealing with this new escalatory environment or looking back and plugging up some of these holes in the story, a la Nord Stream, or the installation of Zelensky and the undemocratic nature of his presidency, and also the collapse of Ukrainian conscription nationally. So this thing is really not going well for the West or for Ukraine, but it's even more dangerous now for the rest of the world because they have no choice in order to save face and keep political legitimacy of so many regimes now that have sunken cost fallacy. They've sunken so much into this that they can't go back. You can see what the real European voice is here. It's Viktor Orban. It's Robert Fico. That's how most European countries should be speaking. They should be putting their hand up and speaking like these people are speaking. And these are the countries who are right on the border of Ukraine. And Romania, you would have had a different Kalin Georgiou would probably be president, and he would be right shoulder to shoulder with Orban, but the US and the Europeans intervened and the French to oust him from his ultimate presidential victory by meddling in the Romanian elections. I mean, that would have been the consensus of all European countries, aside from Poland, who border Ukraine, against the war, pro-negotiations, against escalation. So now it's a stalemate. You have Romania neutral-ish politically. You have Poland still pro-war, not from the population's point of view, but from the political leadership point of view. And then you have Hungary and Slovakia against the war. So, and that's what matters, are the EU members who share a border with Ukraine. Ultimately, it's their voice that matters, or at least it should matter, but it doesn't quite yet. The relationship between Orban and Trump potentially is important, but I think Orban has a closer relationship with Tucker Carlson than he probably does with the U.S. president. And so it may be not as important as it could be.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Trump thing. Trump can change his point of view in a heartbeat. I mean, apparently there was some kind of deal that they agreed upon in Alaska that Trump immediately backed away from, started screaming for a ceasefire again, started screaming about tomahawks, which, Lavrov still talks about the Alaska deal. And so I don't know. Who knows what Witkoff and Dmitriev are having a conversation about. It doesn't seem that Trump is able to accept a deal on Russian terms, considering the U.S. and NATO has lost this war, and they can't necessarily seem to accept it. The Nord Stream thing is interesting that you bring that up. Joe Biden, I remember when Joe Biden gave his speech, and he made this speech effectively saying, if Russia goes in, we're going to blow up the pipeline. And then the pipeline blows up, and immediately everybody is like, hey, we have no idea how this happened. And it's like, well, the president openly said that they were going to blow up the pipeline if the Russians go in.
And he did that in front of Olaf Scholz. Olaf Scholz was standing right next to him and didn't say a word.
Didn't say a word.
That was, to me, incredible.
You really think that that's the linchpin? That's the thing. That's the humiliating factor in all of this, because they don't seem to care. The Europeans don't seem to care about Nord Stream being blown up.
Oh, they care. Oh, yeah, they definitely care. They care that it gets kicked down the road JFK style for like the next 40 years. That they absolutely care. If the truth about Nord Stream is to be known, it is the biggest crime, the largest elephant in the room, possibly, is a huge multinational caper, a crime, and it delegitimizes the whole concept of NATO, the whole concept of collective defense. And then NATO itself is attacking European energy infrastructure. And then attempting to blame it on somebody else. I mean, it's insane. They first tried to blame it on the Russians, like that makes sense.
Yes, they did.
And then they then they've cleverly set up this red herring story with Ukraine. Okay. And which itself should disqualify European support for Ukraine. But because it's seen as something that's benefited Russia, it's been given a pass. But the Germans are dragging their heels on the investigation. They're trying to, extradite Ukrainians from Poland and Italy, who are supposedly key people in this plot. The Danish and the Swedes have the information, either to indict or exculpatory information, which they will not release to the public under national security reasons. Okay, because they had access to the blast sites. So the post-blast forensics are everything in this. And the United States have they also deployed post-blast, probably more like a mop-up operation. And there's evidence to that effect. So, so Germany could have rendered some kind of a interim finding on Nord Stream a year and a half ago. But the whole point of this is to delay. They want to delay and to buy time to change facts on the ground in Ukraine, because that would change the political calculus vis-a-vis how the West feels about this war. And that's really important. The public opinion on this war is really important, because that bears on the significance of Nord Stream, the urgency to find out the truth. Or, in the West, we prefer to brush things under the rug.
Yeah.
If there's other more important things to deal with, we say, oh, we don't need to go back in time. And the Nord Stream thing, oh, it's just it's a mess. We'll never know. We'll never know. It was probably the Ukrainians, and do that for 20 years. But it is important. Because it undercuts the whole legitimacy of NATO, collective defense. It really just destroys it. So as far as the Trump peace plan goes, unless Witkoff has been dangled the rights to build hotel resorts along the Odessa beaches, that's the only thing that's been, and Kushner, and that's the only thing or a new Israeli homeland somewhere in Ukraine. That is the only thing that's going to secure cooperation between Russia and the United States at this point.
Who do you think is getting rid of Zelensky? You think it's the Brits that they're controlling Naboo, or do you think it's somebody else? You think
No,
it's the US effectively
the U.S. have supervisory power over Naboo, and I believe they also had some funding power over Naboo. I'm not sure regarding USAID and how those funding streams are at the moment. I don't know. What I do know is that the British have been running point on the management of Zelensky, the management of political narratives. These are British PR firms, okay, big ones. And so everything from the Bucha massacre to Zelensky's public optics, to his Western tours, to his wardrobe, to the photo shoots in Vogue, all of that is managed out of London. Okay. So is Zelensky. That Scott Ritter had reported, he did an excellent documentary series on Zelensky, that his close security protection are British.
Yeah.
They're British special forces. So that means they ultimately determine his fate, or whether he's going to be safe or not from his own Nazi Praetorian Guard. So the as far as the U.S. goes, so they have control over certain levers and things within Kiev, and the British have control. The British and the U.S. are basically working together, as well as the other NATO countries. But the British and the U.S. manage the important things, and the important things is the leadership and the sustainability of the government, the current government, whatever that government is. And if the U.S. and the British decide that they're going to remove Zelensky, then he will get his notice or not, and he's gone, and the replacement is already in the air, if not already in office by that point. And that'll be a smooth transition. And so I think that's It has nothing to do with what the Ukrainian people want. It's nothing to do with what the Ukraine. It's never been. The Ukrainian people have had no agency. They think they had agency when they elected Zelensky, who supposedly won on a 70% landslide, but that was because they had been propagandized in the previous, 5 years or whatever, of this actor playing the role of president, an anti-corruption president, on their TV as the #1 rated TV program that was force-fed into the minds of Ukrainians. That was a Western intelligence operation from the beginning. Arguably, maybe even Israel involved as well, Kolomoisky being Israeli. He bankrolled the whole thing. So, but that was to prepare the public to elect this comedian with no political experience by such a huge landslide. He would not have been elected to anything, not even dog catcher, had he not been a TV star and been likable and been a comedian. So that was part of the process. So this, as you can see, this has been planned out meticulously for years. This war has been planned out for years. And it was only a question of when they would finally push Russia to the limit so that they would intervene. So I think it's considering the Minsk Accords and the UN Security Council 2202, you can't really call what Russia did an invasion or a full-scale invasion. It was a military intervention, and it was very much in line with UN Charter Article 1 and Article 51 for the Donbass republics, and also Article 1. Russia is merely assisting, and they could have done that at any point in the previous 8 years, considering the civilian casualties inflicted by the Ukrainian military. And if the West still maintain that these are Ukrainian territories, then they also then have to admit that the Ukrainian army that they were arming to NATO standard was using those militaries against their own people.
Yes.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
That's why legally, according to international law, those breakaway republics, Donetsk and Lugansk specifically, although Crimea, it's a separate case. It's actually even a more stronger case for independence, more legally and by the book. But Donetsk and Lugansk followed all of the stipulations under international law that any breakaway republic or autonomous region would have to follow in order to achieve the path to statehood. And one of the qualifications is you have to be under threat, military threat from your own government or your former government. And then your former government would have to cut off your access to the democratic process, the parliamentary process, which Kiev did through the lustration policies. Right. And then you would have to have discrimination based on ethnicity, language, or race, which, again, tick that box. So when you talk to international law scholars, as we do, we can see that the case for statehood from these republics is incredibly strong and robust, even though politically you can't say that in the West because people will start going into conniptions, but it's true. And so when they declared independence and then Russia recognized them for accession into the Russian Federation, well, that was all done legally and by the book. Now, you might not like it politically; it might hurt to say that, and you might say it's wrong, but it is by the book, and it is legal. So that's the whole point of this: is that they have a much stronger case than Kosovo or any of these other sort of Western fabricated constructs. When they broke up Yugoslavia by force, NATO did. Mm-hmm. They just used a different method with Ukraine, and it failed. And it backfired badly, and they didn't count on Russia moving so fast and so decisively. And Crimea is a whole different story. So why am I laying all this out? Because this is a classic case of Western propaganda versus Eastern propaganda. Okay, propaganda is propaganda, whether you agree with it, whether it's truthful or whether it's a lie. But this is a battle of propaganda narratives. Okay, and unfortunately for the West, I think they've lost because the Western propaganda narratives do not comport with their own international law and international institutions, namely the UN Charter, namely precedent case and international law. It just doesn't add up. So the West, in order to make this story work for Ukraine, they have to jettison all of the post-World War II international legal frameworks, norms, and expectations in terms of diplomacy and coming to a conflict resolution through diplomacy and negotiations, and not by war. So they've only managed to temporarily side-skirt these obligations by doing it as a proxy war. But again, as we said from the beginning of the conversation, Jamal, the clock's running out on the proxy war. So they need to convert the proxy war into an actual war in order to keep the story going. This is the dangerous point that we find ourselves in right now.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I think it was yesterday, and this is ironic considering they've spent months being bewildered by Nord Stream. But apparently there were 2 Ukrainians that tried to blow up a train, or they did blow up, I guess, railway tracks. And Germany immediately, or Poland immediately pinned the blame on the Russians, obviously. False flags. This has been one of those things that has been in the air for a while. The mysterious drones that apparently Russia was supposedly flying all the way to Estonia. I don't know the battery power that they have on those drones, but okay, whatever. Are you concerned that there's going to be a false flag that is going to be used as an escalatory mechanism in order to try to escalate the war into another phase?
Well, I think that's what happened in Poland in the last 48 hours. I think there was a false flag attack. I mean, how would the Polish know the identities and know that they were fled to Belarus and all of this other stuff? So they didn't. When I first saw the report, when it first was reported, the entire Western media said, you know, Russia's violated NATO Article 5, an attack on NATO soil, da, da, da.
Yes.
And then 2 hours later, Donald Tusk announces that, oh, we have 2 suspects. They're Ukrainian. I assumed that they had 2 suspects in custody when I saw that. I even did a podcast right as that was breaking. I assumed they were in custody, but they weren't in custody. They didn't have them in custody. And so how can we trust the Polish government that they've ID'd the person, for one, 2, to then surmise that they're somehow working for Vladimir Putin, and 3, you know, say that they fled to Belarus, you know, so, and whether the people they've, you know, said fled to Belarus from Poland are actually from, these Ukrainians. So there's no evidence to suggest any of this. We do know that a border dispute has been created between Poland and Belarus and Lithuania in the last 2 weeks. Okay. I know that personally because I was there and I fell into that border dispute and was unable to return through Poland because of that.
Oh, that's what was going on. Okay.
Yeah. So, so I was attending a human rights conference and speaking on the Ukraine issue. And so there's already an international incident that's taking place between the EU and Belarus. Belarus being bordering Ukraine as well as a frontline country on this war. So you have clearly a situation where who is motivated to do a false flag attack is, what does Russia gain from blowing up a train track in Poland? What do they gain? Nothing. They're winning on the battlefield decisively. They're rolling out a whole new class of drones that are apparently going to be a game changer, and new systems of electronic warfare that are 3 and 4 steps ahead of what NATO is providing Ukraine. So there's no benefit there. Russia warned about false flags in September. They made an official statement from the foreign ministry saying, we've intercepted intelligence about a series of false flags. And what happened after that announcement? The fake drone attack over the Polish border, that happened. We also had the Moldova drone, whatever you want to call it, fake casus belli situation, right after the Moldovan elections, coincidentally, right around the same time as the Moldovan elections. I mean, if that's not shady, I don't know what is.
Mhm.
And a number of these sort of potential false flag attacks. So Russia's already warned about it, and the West would say, "Oh, that's just Putin sowing confusion." You know, it's like, "Oh, but Putin is so brazen that he would warn about it and then he would do it himself." So between Putin's brazenness and Russian disinformation, like the West can explain away anything they're doing. Now, who has been caught doing false flags? Who has been caught doing these types of attacks? The Ukrainians have, time and time again, and asymmetric attacks and so forth. That's their MO. NATO's MO is NATO. All NATO has at this point, since they don't have any conventional military route to victory, they have Operation Gladio.
Mhm.
They have a Gladio route to victory. They have false flags. They have staged provocations. And if you think about drone tech, endless potential for false flags. Endless. I mean, if you really wanted to ramp this up, you could just cause constant chaos, have the media dancing to your tune, and the public just be going crazy. I mean, you could just do this forever. And I think, I'm afraid to say, if we continue with the current political leadership, these type of spineless political hacks that are in all of these EU and European positions, if these type of people are allowed to be in charge, you're going to have a conveyor belt of staged provocations like this constantly to keep their military industrial complex and their defense stocks humming, to keep the tension high and keep us on war footing indefinitely. So, because there's clearly a motivation to do that in the West. If the West is not the one pushing to put Russia and Ukraine at the negotiation table, then they're the ones who are clearly seeking to benefit from an extension of the conflict. There's no debate about this. People need to stop guessing what's going on here. It's clear what's going on here. And the United States is, under the Trump administration, is doing exactly what Joe Biden did. Just Trump's being a little more coy about it. That's all. And giving the appearance of diplomacy with Moscow. And I honestly, I think Russia's just humoring them and going through the motions and continuing to pursue business as usual and to pursue their ground objectives as they have been doing for the last 3 years. And to them, they've already priced in Trump and all of the optics and the constant need for headlines and claims that they've achieved this or that or the other this week. The Russians have already priced that in. The joke's on Washington. Yeah. As far as Europe goes, it's dangerous because you have people in power in these European positions that are career bureaucrats. They themselves are, I think, a very mediocre caliber of individual, none of them with military experience. None of them have any clue as to what is involved in committing their young men and women to, combat major conflagration against a global power, a nuclear power like Russia. They have no idea. But they're all very, very okay and very enthusiastic about shoving the entire Ukrainian male population through their NATO meat grinder. For what? To placate the collective vanity, you could say, of the European project. It really comes down to that at the end of the day. That's what it boils down to. The legitimacy of the European project, which is the EU and NATO. NATO and the EU have a running tandem at the moment. And the US is just sitting in the background and looking at ways which they can profit from this situation. But if you look back in history, Jamal, that's what the US has done in the First World War and the Second World War and the Cold War. And now they're doing it again. Same exact pattern. And Europe clearly has not learned their lesson of the last 125 years.
Patrick, you are fantastic. I swear to God, great breakdown, man. Thank you for this. Patrick Henningsen He's geopolitical analyst, journalist, host of the Sunday Wire, creator of 21st Century Wire, critic of mainstream media, and damn good analyst. Great breakdown, Patrick. Thank you, man.
Cheers, Jamal.
You be safe. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. Patrick is awesome. Great breakdown by Patrick. Great breakdown. Shout out to him for that. And we have come to the end. We've come to the end. Shout out to all my guests, actually. Dr. Wilmer Leon, Kate Klarenberg, Patrick Henningsen. You can check out Patrick on Sunday Wire. You can check out 21st Century Wire. They have damn good articles that comes out pretty constantly, pretty regularly. And just a taste of his political analysis on this issue. I agree with everything Patrick said. I think he's dead on this. The new negotiations thing is the new shiny object that they just threw out. We'll see what comes of that. I guess you can hear my cynicism built into it. There is that. Before I close, I want to play MBS. Drop site points out, look at his body language as Donald Trump goes into this line of discussion when Donald Trump is talking about his bombing the Iranian nuclear sites. And mind you, MBS, or let's say Saudi Arabia, has not necessarily wanted their role into knocking out Iranian missiles out the sky to be well known. Meaning, despite the fact that they were obviously working with the US and many of these countries in Israel, whatnot, in assisting and defending Israel, they didn't necessarily want the stuff to be outed. So you can imagine this line of rhetoric by Donald Trump is very uncomfortable for MBS, who has to sit there and actually listen to what Donald Trump is saying. There's another clip of him talking about Khashoggi where a question is asked effectively, hey, you had a guy chopped up with a bone saw in a Turkish embassy or in an embassy in Turkey. You don't have anything to say about that? But it's this one. It's this one that I want to play first. This is MBS sitting there listening to Donald Trump prattle on about how all of these guys were on the same page as Iran was attacked.
I want to thank you. We've been really good friends for a long period of time. We've always been on the same side of every issue. I think we've done a great job in wiping out the nuclear capacity of Iran. Nobody else could have done that. No other president would have done it. We had the pilots in the Oval Office right here. We were celebrating a very successful attack. So I had them in with that beautiful B-2 bomber that's over there. And they said, sir, for 22 years, we practiced this attack. Our predecessors, these were very young guys. So 22 years, they said our predecessors and us practiced the attack on Iran. But no president ever gave us the go-ahead. 3 times a year, they went out and they practiced the attack. Nobody let us do it.
MBS is looking at him like, will you shut the fuck up? You shut up. Especially the chin move. The chin move.
I just want to thank you. We've been really good friends for a long period of time. We've always been on the same side of every issue. I think we've done a great job in wiping out the nuclear capacity of Iran. Nobody else could have done that.
Unhappiness. But you got to look good because the cameras are watching. Let's keep going.
No other president would have done it.
Chin move. It's like, ugh, shut up.
And we had the pilots.
Chin stretch. I don't know what that is in body language, but it's kind of strange.
In the Oval Office right here, we were celebrating a very successful attack. So I had them in with that beautiful B-2 bomber that's over there.
I don't know if Trump is just unaware of what goes on in other countries. Like if he's just completely blissfully unaware of what is going on in like the way other countries deal with this. Obviously, this is not something he wants to be known, right? Like it's kind of like with the Erdogan thing, where Erdogan was like, where Trump was like, hey, this guy was instrumental in overthrowing Syria. Good job, buddy. And Erdogan's like, will you shut the fuck up? We're doing this stuff in the dark. This is not something we want to be known. Meaning, we do not want it to be well known that we were assisting Israel. I am not even going with you with the Abraham Accords because I don't necessarily want it to be well known that I'm normalizing relations with Israel. I don't want that to be known. And you are continuously outing people for this stuff as if we are on the same page when really this stuff is behind the scenes. This is supposed to be cloak and dagger. This is not supposed to be something that you're outing to the, let's say, the mainstream media on an international stage. He's clearly uncomfortable with that particular conversation. I want to go to the Khashoggi thing before I close it. So they are asking him, is this Khashoggi? I think this is Khashoggi. Okay, that's the Abraham Accords. Let me go to Khashoggi. I want to go to when they bring up Khashoggi. Because, again, at the time, anywhere that you went in the world, it was French page news. Everybody was talking about, hey, you chopped up Khashoggi with a bone saw. Do you have, anything about that? And of course, they found people who they can effectively throw to the wolves. But obviously, that's not necessarily something that was going to take place without MBS saying, hey, go chop up Khashoggi with a bone saw. Get that guy, get that asshole. He's talking too much. Right here. This is, and by the way, Trump in an article pointed out, I protected MBS because they effectively had the daggers out for him. Who knows how much of that is true? But this is a reporter asking about Khashoggi.
He's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you talked.
Khashoggi wasn't controversial. He was just a reporter for the Washington Post. Now, he might have had his stuff going on in Saudi Arabia, but in the context of the United States, he was just a regular reporter.
Talking about whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen, but he knew nothing about it. And we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
Okay, just yes, Mr. President, you allow me to answer. I feel painful about,
concern. He's
Damn it, that's way too short.
our guest by asking a question like that.
Okay, just yes, Mr. President, you allow me to answer. I feel painful about.
He answers this, but effectively it's like, look, man, I didn't know anything about it. I feel bad about it. It sucks, etc. And Donald Trump is like, bad things happen. A man was beaten brutally in an embassy and chopped up with a bone saw. To say that things happen is an understatement of the century. Things happen. Things happen. Shit happens, man. Sometimes you get chopped up with a bone saw. It happens. Happens. What can you do about it? What can you do about it? All right, we have come to the end. We have come to the end. We've come to the end. Yeah, he was chopped up with a bone saw. It was to call it unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Trump has truthful Tourette's. Trump is truthful at times where it is inappropriate to be truthful. Let's say it that way. Under normal circumstances, he just lies. But he has a way of saying stuff. Like for the Syria thing, for example, he's like, we're keeping the oil. We're keeping the oil. We're stealing the oil. Okay, again, usually presidents are a little bit less open about theft of another country's resources, right? There are plenty of these instances that you could kind of point out where Trump is just kind of outing stuff. In this case, he's outing, hey man, we totally agreed on attacking Iran. Now, mind you, he's saying this when Saudi Arabia and Iran were supposed to have this kind of rapprochement brokered by the Chinese. So whatever is behind the scenes with these two countries, in the overt sense, in regards to what they're projecting to the world is, we've settled our differences. We've settled our differences. Saudi Arabia is outward to the world. We don't want you to attack Iran. That's outward to the world. Trump is like, hey, me and this guy are great friends. We agree with everything. And then he immediately pivots to when I attacked Iran with a B-2 bomber. And MBS is like, dude, that was supposed to remain private. That was supposed to remain private. Yeah, it's just wow. Trump did say head choppers had a tough life. Yeah, he did. He did. He's a tough guy. Tough pass. I think he said tough pass. I think he said a tough pass. Tough pass. Head chopping is a tough pass. After all, you go through your youth. And it's youthful indiscretion to chop off heads, apparently, and to be a member of ISIS. So yeah, youthful indiscretion. God, man, can you imagine being in an American court and a guy's just chopped off somebody's head, and the defense lawyer is like, well, he had a youthful indiscretion of chopping off heads. Youthful indiscretion. Youthful indiscretion. What is this? If active investigations are excluded from the Epstein file disclosures, then why did he open the investigations into Clinton, Reed, J.P. Morgan, Larry Summers, something like protection? Well, obviously he's doing it because they're Democrats, and Trump is doing any and everything in his power to throw chum into the water and to throw bodies in front of him. It's like you're being chased by a bear, and you grab the first child that you see and chuck that child behind you for the bear to eat the kid so you can run away. I'm not saying all of these people are children. We're just trying to point out that he's trying to grab whatever body he can get to in order to throw that body in the way of the bear or the moving train that is on the way. Trump's problem is that he had a relationship with a pedophile that goes back for decades. Trump's problem is that even when he was in his first term as president, there are emails that are linking him to Epstein that showed that relationship with that pedophile continued. Trump's problem is that many of those emails also link him to hanging out with victims while with Epstein beyond the time frame to which he called him a quote unquote sicko. Trump has several problems. I'm not above saying that Trump is a pedophile. Lay with dogs, get fleas, right? Lay with dogs, get fleas. It's only a flesh wound. Well, look, man, chopping a man up with a bone saw is not a flesh wound. That's something else. That's completely something else. Clap your hands together periodically. Hard prevents blisters from forming. What? Yeah. I was chopping wood yesterday and have blisters on my hands. It's hard work. Maybe chopping a body is a little bit easier, Cherie. Maybe chopping a body is a little bit easier. I mean, Trump is hanging out with people who are chopping off heads and chopping up reporters. I don't like the way that guy was reporting. Get that guy. And to make it worse, right? It's the guy was there for love. That's the thing that makes it even worse. He knew that he was going into hostile territory. He knew his life was in danger. And yet he went to that embassy to get a marriage permit because he loved the woman that he was with. He was like, damn it, I died for love. Died for love. Died for love. I was in a relationship once where it was not going well. And she told me, she says, I'm fighting for love. Fighting for love. Look, I am one of those people that's okay with that, right? Like I've told you before, I believe all relationships should have a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Darkness is not the word I'm looking for. A little bit of, and it's intensity, but it's a different word for it. It's not devotion. It goes beyond devotion. Damn it, I can't think of the word. But all relationships should have a bit of, let's say, heavy attachment. If you want to say this, I kill 4 people for you, that type of stuff, even though I don't want nobody to kill 4 people for him. I'm just talking about this level of intensity that should be part of all relationships. I think that's the thing that makes it work. Passion, devotion. Have you ever watched the film You? It was a series that was coming on, I believe it was on Netflix. And the guy was like a stalker. He was stalking the woman that he was into. And finally, they eventually get together, and you find out that both of them are nuts. A little bit of that should be a part of every relationship, if it's going to work, and if it's going to stick. Obviously, if the relationship doesn't work, then no. But if it's not worth a fight, you probably shouldn't be together. There's that. So, obsession. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Gary. Every relationship should have a bit of a obsession associated with it. At least that's my thought, anyway. But that could just be me. Fighting for love is like swearing. When you run out of an audience, your mind clears and you realize you're lunacy. Come on. Really? Really? It's like I'm fighting for love. That sounds so badass. I'm fighting for love. Fighting for love just sounds so fucking epic. It sounds so epic. Would say marry her. Just because somebody is quote unquote fighting for love and they say they're fighting for love doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're actually doing. There's a difference in those things. There's a difference in those things. So, yeah. Dr. Susan Jacobs. Jamal Tarantino has a movie called True Romance about a man who kills for love. Oh, that's a bit much. That's a bit much. Yeah, that's a bit much. Obsession is the word I'm looking for. And I would tell you, I'm a sucker for that stuff, right? Like, Vampire Diaries is a really good example. Where what would Damon do for Elena in Vampire Diaries? Or True Blood? What would Bill Compton do for Sookie? Pretty much anything. Pretty much anything. But in real life, yes, don't kill people for love. Don't do that. Or at least try not to. Love is not enough in this world. Yeah, there should be more love in the world, but if you are murdering people for love, that's a bit intense. Obsession, yes. Murder? Oh, that's a bit much. That's a bit much. True Blood was really good. True Blood was really good. Gotta love Bill Compton in that film. Gotta love them in that series. When they killed him off, and then they played Led Zeppelin's Thank You. Oh, epic, painful. Epic, painful. Obsession is a red flag. Obsession is not a red flag. It depends. Again, it depends. It depends. Like, look, if you are not into dude and dude is obsessed, then yes, obsession is a red flag. 1000% agreed. It's like, all right, dude, we're not even together and you're nuts, right? But mutual? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think obsession is a red flag, personally. That could just be me. Maybe I'm just wired particularly. But obsession can lead to abuse or unloving. Well, unaliving. Again, we're not talking about dude with bodies buried in the basement. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about that. Like, meaning we're not talking about like look, I think you guys are thinking the most extreme examples of what I'm talking about. I am talking about a dash of obsession makes a relationship better, as opposed to not giving a shit one way or the other. Meaning, being indifferent towards your partner is a pointless endeavor to me in regards to a relationship. Devotion, not obsession. No. Devotion is different. Devotion is different. Sookie Stackhouse is mine. Yes. Look, devotion is my wife has cancer and I'm staying with my wife in order to ensure it because I'm devoted to my wife. Obsession is different. Obsession is different. Yeah, they're different levels. Obsession is there's a song by Thursday, and he says I could slit my throat, and with my last dying breath, I apologize for bleeding on your shirt. That That. Maybe a little bit less of that, but that. It shows, it gets a, you should want the other person to give a shit. Take It Back Sunday. Yes, you're right. That is Take It Back Sunday. Thank you for that. That is Take It Back Sunday. You're right. That is Take It Back Sunday. Thank you. I think you don't understand what the word obsession means. I do understand what the I understand what the word means. I think you just disagree with my take. Love your obsession. Be fanatical about your love. Thank you. Be fanatical about your love. Otherwise, what does it matter? Otherwise, what does it matter? And again, I am not talking about the most extreme version of the word. I'm not talking about the most extreme version of the word. I'm not talking about the movies. Obsession usually comes from a void within oneself. Mutual respect is healthy foundation for love. Yeah. I get it. You read a book on love and relationships. Fair enough. No, I said what I mean. I mean obsession. Devotion is different. Yes, you should value and respect the other person, obviously. Those things don't deviate from the point I'm trying to make. I like my obsessive compulsive. Thank you. I don't want the clingy, crazy hovering. Again, look, I'm radically independent. Radically independent. I would not do well with a clingy, with somebody who's clingy. Just wouldn't function, wouldn't work. By the same token, there is something to be said about somebody who passionately cares. And again, there are different levels of obsession. I'm not talking about the guy in a film, in a movie, like Dexter, or some rando like the guy in You, like the nth degree of what that means, where you end up with a person in a body bag somewhere. I love you so much, I can't have you with anybody else. I don't mean a lunatic. That's not what I mean. I don't even mean like Saltburn, where the guy's like humping the grave of his dead guy that he loves, right? I'm trying to point out that being there should be more to it than just bland devotion or we're together because we're together. It has to be more than that. There needs to be an exclamation point behind why do people are together. All right. I am going to end this. I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. When devotees turn into an obsession, you're in a cult. Again, we have a very different idea of what obsession means on this. And again, I'm not saying the most extreme. Look, most things go in a gradient. How much you care for a particular person, how much you care for a dog, how much you can deal with a particular situation, how close your friendships are. When somebody says, hey, they're a friend of mine, does that always mean they're your best friends? No. You have people who are like, I talk to this person every random blue moon, and you have this thing, I talk to this person every day. There's a gradient on most things in life. It's not always turned up to a 10. If I'm using the term obsession, I mean the term. I mean it, what I said, I mean the term in the degree to which I said it. But there's a difference between a 1 and a 10. A 10 may have bodies buried in the backyard. A 1 is a passionate, intense take on a particular individual. There's a difference in those things. There have been women out there, Jamal, enjoy time with all of them. Yes. Thanks, Jamal, in the chat. Dr. Susan Jacobs. Well, thank you, Dr. Susan Jacobs. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. When you're obsessed, you have no restraints, and you're basically a wild rabbit animal. Jesus Christ. Is that what you... Okay, fair enough. Okay, fair enough. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You can support this content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, memberships, Buy Me a Coffee, all of those things help support the show. Wandy Lee, thank you, Wandy Lee. Thank you, Wandy. Thank you. Why did I say Wandy Lee? Wandy USA. Thank you, Wandy. I appreciate that. Somebody agrees with me. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day or rest of your night. You take care. John Helmer is going to be on the show tomorrow. You have no idea how much I'm looking forward to that conversation with John Helmer. So that is going to be great. He's going to be on at 7:15 in the morning. Shout out to him for saying yes. He said yes. Have a good one, guys. Be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. I'll talk to you tomorrow.